Betty told me that today. Same sign.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday tomorrow. Yeah. You shouldn't because they hit and you didn't.
Yeah. I feel like we're having an assembly or something.
Outside. Ready? Good morning. Good evening, North Shore. Welcome. This is a packed house. It's not like this every meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. The board just met in executive session and we considered matters regarding proposed pending or current litigation and the employment of a particular person or persons. I am going to ask everyone to stand for the pledge, and we are in luck today. We have one of our high school students, Grace, who's going to sign the pledge along with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice. Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Dr. Z, can you explain to the board why we have so many people here today? So many little people too.
I was saying to Dr. McCary, it feels like an assembly in one of our schools. So this is a great evening. We're recognizing a lot of our students this evening for different accomplishments, and You are the reason we are all here. You are the reason these trustees are here and the district exists. And so these evenings are the best because we get to celebrate your journey, students, and the journey that your parents and your families are on with you. So we're going to recognize three different groups this evening. One is much larger than the other two. We will first recognize our Regeneron scholars, then we have a Save the World group, and our All County Music Festival participants. We'll give more information on each of the students that we're recognizing, and we just ask you to bear with us. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Smythe and Dr. McCary to help me up front here at the podium. And I'm going to ask Mr. Stephen Menchel also to come up, our Director of Science. Okay. The Regeneron Science Talent Search, STS, a program of Society for Science, is the nation's most prestigious pre-college science and mathematics competition. Established in 1942, it recognizes the best and brightest young scientists for demonstrating exceptional scientific leadership potential. Each year, approximately 1,800 high school seniors enter the Regeneron STS. 300 Regeneron STS scholars are selected, and they and their schools are awarded $2,000 each, totaling approximately $1.2 million in awards nationwide. From that pool of scholars, 40 finalists receive an all expenses paid trip to Washington, D.C., where they compete in a rigorous judging process for an additional $1.8 million in awards, with a top prize of $250,000. This year, 2 North Shore High School students have advanced to the semifinal round of 300, Claire Tao and Michelle Yu. Would you please come up? And I'm just going to read a little bit about your research. I must say, for years as an administrator in this district, I've watched superintendents struggle as they try to pronounce the terminology and the advanced vocabulary that you use in these projects. So I'm going to do my best. Mr. Menchel, I might need some help. Okay. Claire Tao. Tigit. Man, it's right off the bat here. Is highly expressed across various types of immunosuppressive myeloid cells induced by glioblastoma extracellular vesicles. Layperson summary. Thank you. I should have used that first. Glioblastoma brain cancer is notorious for being hard to cure because it is able to prevent the immune system from cleaning cancerous cells. Although the exact ways that the tumor cells do this are unknown, it has been shown that the tumor cells release sacs of substances that cause normal immune cells to transform into cells that fight themselves and prevent immune response, thereby helping the tumor grow. Claire's project focuses on observing the makeup of the transformed cells by identifying the specific markers attached to them through a laser machine. The project aims to characterize these transformed cells into categories so future studies can more closely identify what category is more prominent in the population for more effective treatment. It is also hypothesized that there is a common marker among all the different categories of these cells so that they can all be targeted at the same time. This data can be used to experiment with more specific therapeutic possibilities for glioblastoma. Claire, that's amazing. And Michelle, title of the project, Saliva hispanica, the effects of Alzheimer's disease in Drosophila melanogaster. Sorry. C plus. Alzheimer's disease is one of the most common diseases that deteriorates brain function. It occurs due to an accumulation of plaques in the brain. New FDA treatments are used to show the progression of Alzheimer's disease in the elderly population, already showing symptoms of cognitive decline. Since the drug will not cure Alzheimer's, long-term preventative measures such as diet alteration may delay onset of symptoms in prone populations. Therefore, Michelle studied how chia seeds can reduce the effects of Alzheimer's disease in fruit flies. Chia seeds are high in fatty acids, which help to maintain the membranes of neurons and improve the transfer of information. After finding the perfect dose of chia seed oil in fly food, she tested the physical and neuronal fitness of flies over time. She discovered that chia oil can significantly reduce the effects of Alzheimer's disease by improving cognitive and muscular fitness despite aging. It also improved fitness in normal flies. Neurological diseases have become more common with the increase in average lifespan, therefore affecting loved ones by altering their memory and function. It is important that research is focused on preventing or delaying symptoms of such diseases. Equally impressive, Michelle. We're going to take a photo. I think Dr. McCary just reminded me that we want our parents to feel free to come up, take pictures as we're doing the still shot here, so please feel free to do so. And we're going to ask Principal Megan McCormick from the great Seacliff School to come up, please. History of great principals at Seacliff School. I would also like B. Cohen, Marla Jatib, Lily Kletter, Reese Levy, Anna Lasquadro, Lily McAdams, and Lucia Ricci to please come up. So I have some information that Principal McCormick provided, and I just have my own anecdote here. This group of dedicated fourth graders started an initiative called Save the World, totally on their own. No extra credit, no prompting, no assignment. They conducted research, created a plan, and collaborated on a very successful rollout. These 7 students each focused on one way to do their part and save the world. It started small by collecting garbage around town, but quickly grew to where they have made a tremendous impact at Seacliff School. This group presented to a variety of audiences, including our universal pre-K, grade level peers, older students, younger students, and even myself and Dr. Smythe. The process in which they took to get to their final product was quite impressive. Researching, writing, editing, formatting, scheduling meetings, and practicing their presentation. This was such a fun and meaningful, authentic learning experience, and we are so proud of their service journey. And I just want to say it was such a pleasure for you to come to central office. You made the big trek from Seacliff School to central office all the way to 112 Franklin, but more importantly, all the effort and the fact that you just thought of this on your own spontaneously. And this is what us adults call authentic learning. You just call it doing good and saving the world. So it's really excellent. So thank you all for being here tonight, for your families being here, and for doing this and representing so much of what we hope for in our students and in our society. So thank you guys. Great job. Here to take some photos. I want to take a minute to thank one of our high school students, Jack Freeman, for being here to take photos. Miss Newman's not here. So Jack, thank you so much for being here. Jack, not only is your work so impressive, but you also help us out. We're in a bind, and we have beautiful photos of the new turf field that Jack used drone technology for in the fall, and we have it hanging up there at central office and in the athletics office. Really great. So wonderful, Jack. That's authentic learning too, and service to the community. So now we have. Okay, so now we have a larger group to recognize in different areas within. And we're going to have Ms. Dalia Rodriguez come up, our Director of Fine and Performing Arts. Thank you. So it goes without saying that North Shore is a fine performing arts powerhouse. We're proud of that. Biases aside, we all know that our students are performers and they do very well at it. And we have great programs and great curricula and teachers. We hire only the best. And Ms. Rodriguez has so much to do with that. So thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, for all of your work in making this possible. And I believe our awards are organized by level, not by school?
By school.
By school, okay. Glen Head, okay. I don't know if I have, yes, I do. Okay, sorry. Thank you. So we're going to call all of our students up from both orchestra and band by school. And we're going to start with our youngest Viking musicians. So we're going to ask I'm going to read something first before we do that. The All County Music Festival. So all these students are being recognized in the All County Music Festival that just took place. Each year, the Nassau Music Educators Association, NMEA, selects the best student musicians from schools throughout the country to participate in its annual All County Festival. These talented musicians in grades 5 through 12 were chosen based on teachers' nominations and their outstanding scores in the NISMA 2023 festivals. Participation in the festival requires a great deal of commitment as students must learn new repertoire and attend these rehearsals to prepare for the concert. This year's performances took place on January 7th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, and were held at Long Island University's Tilles Center in Brookville. We're proud to share that there were 77 students representing the North Shore schools. Congratulations, North Shore Viking musicians. And now we will call up our students by school. And we're going to start with Glen Head School, Chloe Lim Orchestra, Ronan Nisolo Band, and Sony Singh Chorus. And we're going to take a photo by school, I think, yeah. And we're going to move to our Glenwood Landing Heights. And I'm going to ask that we, and have, we'll have Juliana Curran. Is she here today? Yeah, okay, Juliana, if you please come up to be with us. Thank you. And we have several names for Glenwood Landing, so I'm going to ask that we hold our applause until we've gone through them all. Ariella Babiab, chorus. Miles Cardinale, orchestra. Quinn Caslin, orchestra. And you students, you can come up. Ava Endres, band. Logan Glorioso, band. Mila Hannenson, chorus. Sam Maxwell Band. Joseph Pappas Band. Carolina Sosa, chorus. William Tom Orchestra. And Preston Yao Band. And we're going to ask Principal McCormick to come back up as we recognize our Seacliff students, musicians. Get your steps in tonight, Principal McCormick. Okay, for SCS, we have Jordan Berger, band. Caroline Bernholz, orchestra. Sophia Bonelli, orchestra. Ella Mae Grau, band. Miss Chloe Miller, chorus. Sydney Singh, chorus. Brielle Vogt, chorus. Right, congratulations, Seacliff School musicians. Okay, Vikings in the middle, our middle school musicians. Jillian Aceta, chorus. Margot Bear, band. Christopher Caliendo, band. Noel Dorman, chorus. Georgios Giannakis, band. Gabrielle Glatt, chorus. Amro Hilo, chorus. Christine Shee, band. Jamie Coe, orchestra. Christina Leach, chorus. Declan Levine, chorus. Amelia Lyons, chorus. Ryan Marco, band. Ethan Marco, band. Alexandria Mastrantoni, band. Katie O'Donovan, chorus. Annalise Gamagas, band. And Liam Zhu, orchestra. Okay, our high school Vikings. Big group warning here. Okay, ready? The grand finale. I just want to say, I see with middle school, but seeing some of these students who I've known for a long time, and we've all known for a long time, it's just great, and we're just so proud of all of you students, but our students in high school to see their journey and how you keep improving, keep growing, keep progressing. It's just so impressive, and inspiration to all of us. Elliot Bryant, band. Siobhan Chung, orchestra. May Curiale, chorus. Nora Davison, chorus. Cash Evans, band. Luke Feldman, chorus. Etta Fellows, chorus. Maiko Giannakis, chorus. Apparently there is a rehearsal happening. We might need to actually go on site. We'll do that after the meeting. Samantha Glatt, chorus. Samantha Shee, orchestra. Seamus Hughes, band. All right, here we go. Joseph Hunter, chorus. Mika Akawa, orchestra. Cole Johnson, band. Erica Judd, band. Nicoletta Kenny, band. Joanna Kim, orchestra. Berto Lascaris, band. Ellen Lemontowski, orchestra. Harrison Levin Orchestra. Graham Lippert Orchestra. Ava Maffei Chorus. Olivia Mackin Band. Delilah McAuliffe Chorus. Jax Mordhorst Band. Jessica Palin Band. Wes Peterson Band. Julia Price Chorus. Cecilia Riley Chorus. Ginger Sanborn Chorus. Henry Spina Chorus. Parker Traeger Chorus. Arian Vera Band. Caroline Winchester Chorus. Joseph Winter Chorus. Congratulations. Ava Winter Chorus. And Julian Zazullo Band.
That's how committed they are.
We're sending a bus to get Mr. Catalano in a minute, but just kidding. Yeah, sure. Thank you, buddy. Congratulations, students. Great job. Thank you, families, for being here on such a special occasion. Yeah.
Did we?
Mine isn't either.
You fixed it. Nice, Elliot.
Mine's still not.
Oh, wow, mine works.
Hello?
Yeah, I think.
It's working.
Oh yeah, it worked.
We're good. We're good. Hello? Oh, yeah.
It's rare the school board is speechless. All right, that was exciting. Let's keep moving to the approval of minutes. We're looking at January 11th. Any comments, questions, amendments? Hearing none, I'll accept the minutes as is. Approval of treasurer's report. We have December's report. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Okay, I heard a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Excellent. Action 6, the approval of budget transfers. Our agenda lists what they're for. Motion. And I heard a second. All in favor? Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, excellent. Action 7, approval of the claims audit report from December 2023. Motion?
Motion.
Okay, I heard a second. Questions, comments? All in favor? Excellent. We're all in unison tonight. Miss Ava DeFeo, what do you bring us tonight? We were worried about you last meeting.
Right.
Your stand-in cam. What do you have for us?
Right. Well, things have just been slowly moving back into place after break, people adjusting to the new year. So far this year, we had a successful acoustic cafe, which used to be formerly known as Battle of the Bands. That was just a good place for the students to display their skill in music and arts and all that. So that was fun. It was actually a really good outcome. A lot of people ended up coming. We plan on doing another one in the spring, but we don't officially have details for that yet. We also had, our basketball game, our fundraiser basketball game. That was a lot of fun. It was last Friday. We ended up raising 2 full boxes, like huge boxes of non-perishable items. And Ms. Chen our advisor dropped off those food boxes on Monday, I believe. So that went well. For the future, right now, all of our attention's pretty much focused on sports night. We're working on collaborating with like the arts departments to get like our banners ready. Each grade has determined their theme. We went with movie franchises this year. So we have Marvel, Star Wars, Harry Potter, and I don't remember the last one, but the freshmen picked their own one. And we're working on making the decorations, the banners, organizing the dances, and all that good stuff.
Any concerns?
Right now, we're in the middle of midterms week. We haven't really had a lot of time to get back into the groove of the new year, I don't think yet. So, but I mean, I think everything's going well so far, to my knowledge.
All right, sounds good. Keep us updated.
Will do.
Thank you.
Good luck on your midterms.
Thank you.
All right, you are free to leave, unless you want to stay for Dr. Z's report, which you're welcome.
It's okay. Thank you, Ava, so much.
No
It
problem.
was a great
Thank you,
job. We have some great events coming up. Good evening, everyone. We had our Rising Ninth Grade scheduling meeting this past week, yesterday. Next week, on Monday, on Tuesday, we have our middle school scheduling night for incoming 6th grade. So for our current 5th grade families, Dr. O'Hara and Dr. Brooke will be talking about rising into 6th grade and what that experience will be like. Also on the middle school front, pleased to announce and re-announce that the middle school maskers will be performing Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella next week on Friday, February 2nd and Saturday, February 3rd. We're looking forward to a great performance by our maskers in the middle. I just want to commend Ava, the high school SGO, and our athletics department for what they did with the food drive at the basketball game. Such a smart combination of efforts, and our basketball games, both boys and girls, have been very exciting. We have more action tomorrow night. Our JV team is away at Malvern. Our girls team is here at 5 p.m. against Malvern, and our boys are away against Malvern tomorrow night at 7. We also have varsity boys swimming, and we have cheerleading this Saturday. And again, I know I always say it, but our cheerleading program, which was kind of like a grassroots program, continues to build, and they've just done a great job. 2 more quick announcements. We had a great budget boot camp this week at the middle school library. A lot of attendance and really great conversation. I think, as most folks know, this budget design and development and decision-making process is going to be a bit more challenging than last year's, and last year's was challenging. So really having everyone's voice involved in the input process is just so key and so important. So I think this week's boot camp reflected that. On Tuesday the 6th, which is in a couple of weeks, we will be having that on Zoom. So I'll be sending out the link. We just know it's a reality, that makes it easier for folks to attend. So we'll be sending out that link shortly, early next week, and we hope to hear even more voices. And in the boot camp, we go through kind of like the architecture of the budget. Mr. Pappas and I are trying some new things. We're also going to be having meetings throughout the spring before the budget vote, talking about the budget, but also talking about your experience as families in the different schools. So we'll have an elementary meeting tailored to the budget, middle school, high school, athletics, the arts. And we got some feedback this week at the boot camp about some other ideas. So we'll be releasing that information shortly as well. We'll surely do some of those meetings on Zoom as well, just for the convenience sake. You don't need childcare. You might still be at the office, so on and so forth. So we'll be doing that, and we're trying some new things this year in terms of that process. Again, we look forward to that participation. And kind of on the budgeting front, I did want to mention that we will be traveling to Albany on Monday, like we did last year, to meet with some of our legislators, and talk about our specific needs at North Shore, our hopes for legislation to really put our concerns as a community on the map. Not just about LIPA, but, some of the concerns that the closure and the Nassau County settlement with LIPA have engendered. And we're really excited for that opportunity. And we look forward to reporting back to our Legislative Action Committee and to the board about what we find out there and what we're able to communicate to our representatives. And that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Z. And I will reiterate, Tuesday night's budget boot camp was really great. I think it was one of my favorites. So I look forward to the other ones coming. All right, let's keep going here. So regular business, we're going to have a discussion tonight, the state of our buildings and grounds. I know this has been very anticipated.
So yes, it was a great idea that the board had to have a meeting focused on this. We've had some other developments. We've put the state of current construction on the website. We have a very robust construction steering committee, and I want to thank them for their input and the board's input. I also want to thank Mr. Hall, who's here this evening, who will make up for any specific knowledge that I do not have, but certainly in generating the list of future projects that the board was sent. And Mr. Pappas as well, for your help in creating this presentation. This evening, we're going to talk about the state of current construction. We're going to talk about lessons learned from the 2019 bond projects. Mr. Pappas is going to speak to us about the energy performance contract. And then we're going to move, there's a lot of dense information in the slides, but it will be posted through potential future projects and the path forward in terms of funding and community input and collaboration with our community stakeholders. So we're going to try and be efficient, because we do know that really the value in this presentation, the board knows a lot of this information. We're going to hit on the high points for the public who's watching and in attendance, but the discussion that the board will have about this is so key. So without further ado, Mr. Pappas and I will present to you. And if you would like to move to the front row of the seats. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. So this evening we're going to speak about the state of our buildings and grounds, and with a big focus on the current projects, future projects, and planning and funding, the big themes. You can see here a picture of just outside North Shore Middle School. And I remember a year and a half ago when Mr. Pappas and I came into our current positions, and I often joke with Dr. O'Hara that when we started, your office was a hole. It really was. And so you can appreciate the process. It was a pretty stressful summer, as our trustees, especially the trustees on the construction steering committee, can attest to. But we were able to persevere and finish this project, which we kind of characterize as the flagship project of this bond work from 2019. Really doing amazing, inspiring work at our middle school, connecting the two corridors that were dead ends for a long time and creating a really nice, engaging student common space that's very beautiful. And I know that our students love. But of course, we have a security vestibule now and a true main entrance here. We are making great progress on the construction that started pre-COVID with the 2019 bond in our middle school. Most of that work is complete, and in our high school, including items such as the security vestibules, exterior and interior doors, a visitor management system, video surveillance and card access system, our replacement of the paging systems, air conditioning for classrooms in all of our buildings, the STEAM innovation labs at the middle school, classroom renovations, the renovation of bathrooms throughout the district, and electrical infrastructure updates. We're going to talk about the pace of construction, as we do have some issues, especially in our elementary schools, that we're working through. We made great progress in our elementary schools, especially in Glen Head School and Gilwood Landing School, with our new nurse's office. We had support service rooms replaced, and we've had relocated an E&L room at Glenwood Landing School, and new renovations to our SWES room and enrichment room at Glenwood Landing, and the new front entrance at Seacliff School. In terms of the unfinished work at our elementary schools, one big item, and the board, has been in discussion about this for a long time. We are still working on our elementary libraries. We have had issues with the contractor, and we are working to secure a new contractor to finish the library project and remaining bathrooms in the elementary school. We are hoping that we can complete a good chunk of that work this spring and finish this summer. In our middle school, we really have completed all of those big items. We're working with a different contractor at our middle school and high school. But as you can see in this building, we have completed the work on the new main office, on the new entranceway, commons area. We have a new renovated fax room, renovated the locker rooms in the gym area, the new security vestibule, and some new AC charging stations. Now, our high school is moving along, but it's certainly not complete. And most noticeably is our high school front entrance, which we hope will be completed within the next 6 to 8 weeks, if not sooner. But we continue to reestablish a completion date for that. We've had some supply issues with that. But that is a very noticeable item that's not finished to all of our residents, and we understand that. We did complete the replacement of the synthetic turf field, which is a big accomplishment, and the renovation of one of our art rooms into a dance studio, and creating a new art room out of another classroom, thanks to the support of our board and our community through the use of our capital reserve that was existing. We did replace the gym floor in the high school 2 years ago, and also in our auxiliary gym. We renovated the life skills room, created a testing room, and a world language lab renovation that is currently being used as a classroom. We renovated the Media Arts and Media Center, the library, and we have new bathrooms that we're finishing in the auditorium, as in addition to the security vestibule and front entrance at the high school. And in both our middle school and high school, we have new AC central air. We've moved the window units that were in the middle school and the high school to the elementary school. So while some of our large areas in our elementary schools are not air conditioned right now, and you'll see that on our future project list, a majority of our spaces throughout the district are now air conditioned. We did have at Glen Head School, middle school, and the high school the addition of solar panels, and we're going to talk about our energy performance contract that's related to that in a second. I did want to take a moment to look at lessons learned from the 2019 bond, and it really is a 2020 hindsight situation, a Monday morning quarterback situation in many ways. As I remember when this bond was passed in December, and all of our schools were shut down 4 months later, and that caused a whole host of supply chain and inflationary issues that really did plague the implementation of this bond and created a lot of difficulty. Nevertheless, I think we did learn some important lessons from this process. While we did involve a lot of folks in the process building the bond, I think it was a reminder that we need to obtain even more end user feedback in advance. Certainly, we're going to do that now, but thinking a little more ground up in advance. We received a lot of feedback from teachers after, as things were getting finished, and we continue to do so at the high school. But that's something I think we should do in the beginning more, and you'll see our plan to achieve that. One thing we've talked about with the board and with the community a lot is opting for a smaller scope in the number of projects. And sometimes if the cost of money is low in terms of borrowing, if that makes sense, the big bond does make sense. But we did see how the scale of this project, and again, COVID was happening, created all these unique difficulties, but that caused some difficulties that we're still dealing with. Use of fewer general contractors, and that kind of goes with the second bullet. If we can use, and then sometimes the way a big bond is split doesn't allow you to do that if the same contractor doesn't bid on a second part. But that is something we've learned about trying to work with fewer GCs and trying to have one that unites the project throughout the district. Phasing work more slowly and gradually. Specific the summer of 2022, I think we realized early on into that summer that we had phased in too much work, and that we did finish what we needed to finish. We're still working on some of that right now. And then to conduct a final survey to obtain additional feedback on final projects and add alternate projects. And that's something that we're kind of processing now through our construction steering. In hindsight, but I think one thing we realized at the end of this bond is perhaps some feedback from folks before we broke ground might have changed some of those decisions about add alternates and what was actually in the bond. And finally, using a mix of budget, reserve, and bond to insulate against inflation. And that's something we're going to talk about at the end in terms of going forward, really using that mix strategically to make decisions, which we will need to do as we face fiscal challenges as a district. And Mr. Pappas is going to speak to us now briefly about the energy performance contract and the status of that project.
I'm going to give a quick overview of the projects that were done through the energy performance contract and then where we stand in terms of the completion. As you're aware, one of the big items that the district took on was this energy performance contract, which has a big initial outlay of investment, but it's designed in order to have the savings from the items that are done pay for over time the cost of the initial outlay. The energy performance contract was actually broken down into several projects, and some of these projects were done throughout the entire district, and others were in select locations based on the need and the items that were being done. One of the big projects that was done through all of the buildings was an upgrade to all of the lighting, installation of high efficiency LED lighting. And this is one of those projects that probably is the nicest because you get to actually see it. Some of the other projects that I'll touch upon are behind the scenes. They certainly add efficiencies and savings of money, but this is one that not only improves the aesthetic of the buildings, but also the safety, lighting up areas that may have been less lit before. Other big items had a lot to do with the temperature and heating network optimization. This included installation of boilers, upgrading equipment, insulating pipes, which both help to create more energy efficiency, but also there were some areas that got very hot because of the lack of insulation, and that was improved during this process. Also, the centralizing boiler controls, which allowed boilers in some places where boilers were running 2 boilers at the same time, more efficient to have one shut down once the building reaches temperature and kick on only as needed, which is a great savings. And finally, the optimization of heating zone controls, which primarily done in the administration building. One thing that I didn't know is prior to this, we had only 2 zones in the administration building. So when one would come on, you would basically, one zone would do a couple of floors, where this broke it down into 5 zones. So it's only turning on in the areas or on the floors or rooms where you need it. Several of the schools, a remote access building management system, which allows for monitoring and maintaining the system virtually, so they can see what's going on, adjust temperatures if something's left on, if something's too warm, that can be done from outside. And a various speed drive that was installed at the middle school, which I found interesting. Prior to this, it was a 1-speed, what pushed the water through the heating system, a pump was a 1-speed pump. And the new pump allows it to speed up and slow down based on need, as opposed to running at one consistent speed at all times. Firsthand, plug and load management systems put in. It shuts off the power to certain items during hours when nobody's there. If a classroom had left the air conditioning on, or if there were lights or other things left on, computers, PCs, it would shut them down at a certain hour and then come back on in the morning. The reason I say I learned that firsthand was I was one day working till 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden I couldn't print and realized my printer was set to 7 o'clock at night and I was unable to print. Eventually figured it out. It is something that can be shut off if you're there working by pressing a button. In the other slides, previous slides, also touched upon the air conditioning in all classrooms at the high school and middle school. And finally, the solar panels that were installed at both the high school, middle school, and also Glen Head schools. It was a good project, especially at high school and middle school, because there's so much flat roof the installation, you were able to utilize a lot of that space for the installation of these solar panels. The status of the projects, all of these projects, which was also reflected in the initial slides of the presentation, have been completed. The next step is in the projects is the performance of monitoring and verification. That takes about a year where they will look at what we're using in terms of electricity and how efficient we really are in comparison to some of those measurements that they took prior to the start of this. And at the conclusion, Ecosystem will prepare a comprehensive annual report at the end of the year to let us know where we're savings. And they'll also tweak things if it's not measuring up to what they initially thought.
Okay, so in advance of this meeting, we did send the board a list of possible future projects, which they've seen a version of before, but we're trying to add some categories to it that you might not have seen before. We had categorized it in the past as, instructional or the purpose of the space. We want to add some categories like maintenance and indoor, outdoor. One thing that we talked a lot about, in a just very simple way as this bond work has been getting finished, is how we've done so much work inside of our buildings. And it's the kind of inside work that you could see as you walk through the hallways. There was some HVAC work, some electrical work, but I think one pattern you'll see as we go through here is there's a theme of outdoor work, the aesthetics of the outside, a desire to look at things like walkways and signage and shrubbery and weeds, but then also the inside work that's like deeper inside that you can't see. Some of the things like septic and plumbing and deeper electrical work. And so what we've done is, and I'm going to kind of work through these quickly, is to organize these ideas under a category of urgent, needed but not urgent, and wish list. And these are where the discussion will be in terms of the board, in terms of the community, where these items move around. Do some items that we're saying are wish list, when the board talks about them or the community talks about them, become more urgent? Do we add projects in that discussion? And so that will be the first phase in helping us to figure out how we then plan to accomplish this. So really prioritizing our needs is so important. And I'm not going to read every single one, but we're going to hit on some high notes, and then we have a summary at the end. But I think you'll see that pattern throughout. Certainly at Glen Head School, we need to look at some masonry work. We need to look at fencing and looking at the septic and leaching pools, which is something we've talked about with the bond work, with the capital reserve. There's a theme of looking at concrete work and also looking at, as you move to the needed but not urgent, controller upgrades, looking at fence work and fence replacement, more wish list items, things like an outdoor classroom. One wish list we have is really building a full auditorium at Glen Head School. These are things we've talked about for a long time. Replacing and relocating classrooms. As we move to Glenwood Landing School, we have the same kind of patterns. We need a lot of work outside on buildings and grounds in terms of the weed guards, weeding, landscaping. Those are themes that we've talked about a lot, and folks have brought that to our attention as well. We also want to look at some less urgent items, roofing, masonry work, and also just an example of some wish list projects, synthetic turf on the upper field. We've talked about that, and a new outdoor learning space. At Seacliff School, There's less outdoor work needed, not that there's none needed, but more of the work is inside, HVAC, operational temperature controls. There are some needed items on masonry work, repointing. Like all of our buildings, they're old buildings, so some of this is more maintenance work. And then some of the wish list items. We've talked for years at Seacliff about a covered area over the blacktop. That's something that actually all of our elementary schools would like, so you could have outdoor recess in the rain and some of the inclement weather, replacing the playground, and again, creating an outdoor learning space. At our middle school, again, very dense list, a lot of little items, little things that are more urgent. We've talked about a new middle school sign, the triangle middle school sign, the E3 sign, as we call it, needs some love and attention. A smaller item, but we're already looking into that. Again, weeding, weed guards, landscaping, but also things like ventilation in the wood shop, looking at backflow perimeters, looking at also, as we move to less urgent, fencing throughout the buildings, the septic tanks and leaching pools here too. And then as we move to the wish list items, again, outdoor learning space and considerations for alternative turf. And our high school, similar pattern. One item that we talk a lot about is the fencing on Glen Cove Avenue. These are not cheap items, but a little less expensive, hopefully, that we could do sooner rather than later. Landscaping, as well as looking at lighting in the courtyard area, looking at the bleachers in the gymnasium. And finally, as we move to the wish list items, stadium lights, something we've talked about. The big item here that I skipped over is the track. The track at the high school is a major area of focus. We replaced the turf, but we're looking now and talking about that in construction steering. The track itself does need some serious attention. And then, besides our 5 buildings, we do have other areas that are structures within our district. On the high school grounds itself, we have our schoolhouse in Victorian. These are not urgent needs, but the schoolhouse is a little older. It could use a new roof. We need some new glass, intruder-resistant glass that wasn't put in the beginning, and HVAC attention, as well as in the Victorian, and maybe repurposing the instructional space of the Victorian as our programming changes. Our transportation depot on Shore Road really needs some new glass in the security area. It also needs less urgent HVAC upgrades, charging stations, and other things like concrete floors, replacing the flooring and carpet, and HVAC upgrades. That should be actually just in the needed but not urgent list, sorry. One structure, and I put a geographical map here because this might be one we don't know exists. It is the old bus garage on the Glenwood Landing property. It looks like a maintenance shed. It's usually used for storage, but that actually is one of our oldest structures, and that needs a lot of attention as well. There's a floor abatement needed. Again, it's a non-student space. Ceiling cracks, and looking at windows, as well as the exterior stairs, which really do need serious work. Things like lighting, exposed pipes being covered, the radiators, but then the wish list items, other more specific, masonry repair, new doors, and the exterior stairs. And then finally, our administration building. One thing that we did to stretch the bond money further, because costs did increase, is we took in that bond work a lot of the administration work out of the bond. So what we need to do is really attend to that work and some serious work that we felt could wait. These are not student spaces. We do care about the adults in central office, but because of the nature of the work going on, there was a little less urgent. But we need to look at windows. We need to look at the fire escape. And some of the roofing, and there is some framing work that needs to be done on the second floor of central office as well. I call these Hall's notes, like Cliff's notes. I don't know if Mr. Hall would agree with them, but a summary, because there was so much information there and I moved quickly. And this is what, I'm hoping to garner tonight from the board. And as we go into our community discussions, what are those big takeaways? Certainly the high school track, existing septic and leaching pools, which are operational, but we know they are old and we want to act before it's too late, and before it becomes a serious problem. Weeding, landscaping, and weed guards. We know that the aesthetics has been a big topic of discussion. Concrete asphalt walkway replacement, the driveway into the high school. You look at the new middle school entrance right here and what the roadway looks like. It just looks so great. Of course, at the same time, that magnifies the other areas that are older. Inside, we do still have some holes and gaps in terms of air conditioning, and where the HVAC isn't new, more in the elementary buildings and the ancillary buildings. Generators, we've talked a lot about this in construction steering, how we've fixed generators, but we do need to fix some of the mechanical pieces, including boilers and boiler controls as well, which are older and have not been touched in some time. I wanted to talk about a couple pieces now about process, just looking at funding sources. So 3 main funding sources: the budget, a potential bond, which we are finishing the 2019 bond, and the use of capital reserves. Our budget is hard to fund big projects. We can fund smaller projects in there. A good example of that is the gym floor that was included in the budget in 2022, and even smaller projects. But even that is limited. As we talk in the next several weeks about our budget planning process, you'll see, us really trying to minimize non-instructional expenses, maybe make cuts in some of those areas, not that they're not important, but so we can preserve the instructional needs that we have and affect those less. Everything will be affected, but we've tried to make some decisions there to preserve the experience for kids and achieve savings at the same time. A bond would require budget space with falling off debt. I think that's one thing Mr. Pappas and I have talked about. Whenever you take out a bond, you would then have an annual line item in your budget to pay the interest on that bond, to pay the debt like a big loan. And this year we don't have any debt falling off. And next year, we might start to see some debt in the next few years after this year, some debt falling off. Of course, that's a decision, because just because we have debt falling off doesn't mean we replace it immediately. That's then budget space we might want to use for other things or just save. So that's a conversation. But a bond would be more appropriate for larger projects. And then finally, a capital reserve. And we have an existing capital reserve. We amended it and tapped into it, thanks to your support and the community support, to complete the turf field and the dance studio last year. It's an existing source of funds. We're calculating the exact number, but we do know sitting in that existing capital reserve, we have over $1 million, which is a healthy sum that we could use to further fund this capital reserve, or move it into a new capital reserve that has a new scope and a new purpose in it. And that is appropriate for all sizes of projects. Mr. Hall would argue there's a fourth funding source, and that is the energy performance contract itself that pays us back. And I would say a smaller funding source, if we're going to add a fifth, is donations. The donations of our parent organizations. They've done historically amazing work in building outdoor classrooms. I think of the outdoor classroom at Glenwood Landing. It was so much of that was built by families and donations, and same with Seacliff School, as well as auctions and fundraisers conducted by our PCA, our SCA, our PTO organizations. So that would be a fifth source. I'd say for fifth source, and I'd say for smaller projects, but equally important. So the process going forward, as we really, that list is very dense. There are a lot of small items, some redundancies. So I think really ironing out that list after tonight, really getting the board's feedback and really cleaning that list up, making it a little more definite. And then with that, using that and giving folks access to that list to generate their thoughts and having feedback surveying the faculty, the staff, parents, and the community on priorities on projects, and the timeline of how they think this should be done and the types of funding they think should be used. And of course, adding projects that aren't on the list that we might be missing. After that, we would look at cost estimation. So the next step would be working with our cost estimators or architects to really look at what it would take to go forward with these projects, what the cost would be, then bringing that information to community meetings and meetings of our board, of course, to get input on what folks are seeing. It's really refining that list. Finally, a proposal to the Board of Education for a way forward. This is a draft timeline of what that could look like if that was the process. First and foremost, we really need to complete the bond work of the bond that we're currently sitting in. That endpoint has been moving as things aren't finished, and we're hoping to get to a true completion point this summer. And we hope that by the end of the school year, certainly it's really specific to the elementary schools where we need to finish the work so that the high school is really intact besides punch list items, and really focusing in on finishing the libraries at the elementary school and the bathrooms at the elementary schools. Then we will be doing this year, starting now, really the building condition survey with our construction managers, SAB and engineers, and that will provide a lot of information that adds to that list that I just showed you. And we will at the same time get feedback from the community on future projects, and that would extend into fall. At the same time, and beginning cost estimation and finishing that after we finish the feedback process. Community meetings when we have information about cost and more definites, and then finally proposals to the board in the fall. And then, that would allow us time for decisions to be made about a potential capital reserve, a bond, and the timeline for how we want to stage that out on these projects. I really do think, and I've talked about this concept of the journey to 2030, we have an instructional strategic plan for our students and their experience, which comes first, but we also need a financial strategic plan and an infrastructure strategic plan. All three really do need to work together in harmony, especially in the face of the challenges that we're going through right now. At the Budget Boot Camp this week, we talked about mountains of clarity and mountains of cost. We talked a lot about that last year. And unfortunately, we have some mountains of clarity emerging again. There are some things that are unclear in terms of LIPA's future development down on Shore Road in the LIPA campus, whether certain pilot payments that we get might be coming off that we did not know until recently. That might be a possibility. We need to get answers. There might be development. So I'm kind of sounding pessimistic right now, but on the other side, we know there might be residential development at the Engineers Country Club. We know there might be other development down there in Shore Road by private companies or by LIPA itself. Perhaps development in other parts of our school district that could help raise the assessed value in the different property classes and actually, in effect, lessen the burden on our individual homeowner taxpayers, our Class 1 taxpayers. So all of that is unknown, and I think will require us to get some answers and establish a long-range plan. So thank you very much. I know we went very quickly through this, especially those details. It's hard to present on some of the specific projects, but certainly as we refine this list, we will come back again and give more photos of specific work and talk about, our approach on those more focused goals. Thank you very much. And I usually take notes in this meeting, but I thought maybe we'll stay up here with Mr. Hall and kind of interplay here. on questions.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. A little bit of a different kind of presentation. Who would like, David?
Sure. I guess it's not a secret that I was excited about this presentation tonight. I'm jumping to go first in my comments. I do really appreciate this. I know the community does. I think you've shown that you're listening to the community, that people are concerned about these things, and obviously it's how our tax dollars are spent. One of the ways they're spent, and it's important. I was impressed that the list of things we spent them on really reflect our values. From STEAM at those younger levels that are showing in the results in the work in our kids, arts and athletics, security, and also the efforts we've made to save costs and reduce our carbon footprint have definitely been expressed to us by the community. I think there's certainly fair frustration about the high school entryway. That is something I certainly hear about. Not that it's about me, but having two kids in that building and doing drop-offs and whatnot, I'm highly aware. But I think it was really helpful for us to see the context of that in the overall amount of scope that we've done. And so, of course, the one high visibility project, well, one out of two, if you count the lower level libraries, are the ones that still get the attention. It's easy to gloss over things like we walk in here and this building is done. I've been in meetings in this room when there was a stage here and it was reverberating, and this work is all just working for our kids. Comments that I had with questions. The first one you covered, which was I had wanted to give a list of severity, so to speak. It's one thing to say we need to replace the boilers, but it would be helpful to us as a board and as a community to know which ones are nearing the end of their useful life and which ones maybe neighbors are complaining about noticing. So to speak, without going too much into septic systems. So that's a really important part of this. I'm not looking to have Stu Schiller, one of our internal cost estimators, give us specific numbers on these sundry projects. It's way too much work, but I think it would be very helpful to us to have a sense. Is this you're looking online at restaurants, is it a $4 sign or is it a $1 sign? That might be helpful, so we have a sense. Certainly replacing a fence is a lot different than air conditioning some of these large spaces that are still out there. And I think understand the scope of these things, maybe a 3 or 4 tier system would really be helpful. And I'm personally of the belief that in terms of trading off for 1 or 2 of those large projects, thinking about how many rusty fences, cracked sidewalks, worn paint, broken speed bumps, the shrubbery, all those little things could be accomplished with only a 6-digit figure that could knock a ton of them off the list, either through the budget, because you really very well explained how we separate these funding sources into smaller projects through the budget or larger projects through our funding mechanisms, would be really helpful as we evaluate this. You were really quick with the presentation, which I like, so I'm talking a little fast. So I know you'll go back and do the notes later. The list is terrific. It is a great list, but pursuant to your first point, I'm sure it's just a starting point, and that if we take this list and say to the community, hey, which of these do you prioritize? I think that's starting at step 2. I think we need to go back and start with step 1. And ask the community what we are missing, which you mentioned. I know, just as a Glenwood Landing family, one thing that is a real bugaboo for a lot of people is the invasive, aggressive poison ivy along Cody. You mentioned here weeding and whatnot. That's a small thing, but I'm sure if you ask the community, hey, what's on there that we haven't listed, or just what do you think is important, you'll get a lot of pings on that one, and other ones that, of course, I don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. So asking before this list, even though the list is great, I think is going to be really helpful. I think one comment that I'll make and I'll kind of glance over is, I think we've all heard the comments in the community about why would a district that invests so much in our kids and our education have certain little parts of things that don't look necessarily reflective of that investment. And I think about little things like if you're walking around the high school or this school, on some areas, there's tape from signs that were hung up when Dr. McCary was a student here. And little cleanup things like that, I think, go a really long way. Ceiling tile, just little things like that, almost the sort of the daily punch list, but not treating it at the end of a project, treating it as just our existence, I think would go a long way to be proactive for student experience. The way you organized the project, I thought was great, going building by building, but there's one aspect I'd like to consider looking at a little differently throughout the district, and I think that's our athletic fields. For example, we have, by my count, baseball and softball diamonds. We have the boys baseball stadium. We have 2 softball fields. We have 2 diamonds here. We have one at Glenwood Landing that doesn't really get used at all. We have one at Glen Head that, from what I've heard, if you hit a home run, you could potentially hurt children playing in other aspects. Do we need 7, or we have the one right across the street from Seacliff at Carpenter Field? Do we need 8 fields? Do those 8 fields, if we do, should they be kept up and should they be used? If they're not used, at Glenwood Landing, we've heard through the years that the lacrosse, not the one up to the northern side of the school, but the one south by Scudder's and Cody, is potentially tapers off on a side or isn't quite the right size. Do we need a huge baseball diamond there that people, I mean, I use it. When I was coaching, I would bring kids there. We'd all run the bases and whatnot. But do we need that as a school district? Could we use that space more efficiently? Find out what we need between our extracurriculars, between our phys ed classrooms. I don't know if in Glen Head or in Glenwood Landing, they go out there in the schools and they teach them where the bases are. I know that little kids growing up in this community, because I coach T-ball, they don't know, where first base and where third base is until we tell them. Yeah. So we got to think about how we're using them and when we're using them and if it's the most effective space. And I do think it feeds into a topic that we talked about from the Revenue Generating Committee, which is if, as a result, we don't necessarily need all those lands, it's worth considering if those are potentially in a one-time fiscal crisis that we are in with regard to the evaporation of certain LIPA funding, to be able to think about one-time offloading some things, some space that isn't being used. So I think if we look at all those things, think about the sports that we're using, find out if we have the right facilities throughout the district, not just building by building. I think that could be really helpful. In addition to indoor spaces, I know the middle school gym is a huge crunch. It's tight getting schedules in there. There is talk of new sports. Badminton is something that's coming. And I think we need to think about where these things will go. So it should be forward looking as well. I also think that in terms of being aspirational, we had talked, this list and this compilation that we're putting together is obviously all about the very mundane, but also about the aspiration about where we're going forward. I think we do want to at least consider the idea of a second big field, and that potentially downhill from here could be another option, not to put lights in an area the community has consistently given us opposition to, but at least thinking about the concept of a large lit field down, I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing past you, Chris, down the hill where the neighbor is, at this point, a golf course that wouldn't really disturb neighbors that much. It's even downhill, from the folks in Seacliff, et cetera. So I think that's something that should be considered, engaging need and also community interest. And if that was a way to reconfigure things as well. And so those are my main notes. Just very quickly, the building at the middle school near the softball field, what is that building?
Is a garage storage area for buildings and grounds. There's a lot of furniture stored in the bottom of that, and then the top part is our lawn and snow removal equipment.
So that's used and necessary. It's one of those buildings like the quote unquote old bus depot that, John, I'm sure you could, blindfolded turn off and on all the lights. But I think we could, maybe probably look at that building as an area.
We've looked at it, we've talked about it. Some environmental concerns with the exterior composition of the materials is impacting our ability to do something quickly, but with funding and the right procedure, we can definitely tackle that.
Advocating for it necessarily, but it should be on the list because
it is.
It's not necessarily in great shape. And for the record, there is a severe parking shortage here as well. It's less of a problem now, but something else to consider are the temporary storage units. There's still one, I think, down by the end of the parking lot by that sump at the high school that I think is one that we want to, both in terms of beauty, in terms of necessity, in terms of cost, do we need all these things? And then the only other question.
Just for clarity, one of those is the Red Cross shelter.
Oh, okay.
So that has to stay for hurricanes, and the other one is athletic storage. So really the only ones left are the two here at the middle school. There's a lot of furniture left over we brought new furniture in. We're trying to do the right thing and auction off and get rid of the equipment, try to make some revenue off of it before, or see if other school districts need it before it goes in a dumpster.
Theoretically, if we really were done with bond 2019 this summer, and I say theoretically because I'm on the construction steering committee, so I do know the massive amount of work that John, you and your team do, and the pushing boulders uphill that it often is. You talked about lessons, by the way. I think you got to give a little mea culpa for the fact that you didn't predict a pandemic and historic supply chain interruptions.
Agreed.
And certainly, inflation does come and go, but the spike that we saw as a result of loose money during that time to save us from recession during the pandemic was certainly a huge factor. So I think that's probably worth noting. And just my final question is, in constructing this, how long do you see the scope? How long are we going to be able to use this? Because coming up with funding for these, this is I'm not going to guess how many $100 million. I mean, this is a huge list. We're not going to accomplish this soon, especially in light of where we are and those unknowns. Which, by the way, you also didn't give yourself credit enough for. I think you should probably mention to the community. It's not just we're waiting on an answer of what's going to happen. I mean, we're doing so much to work with our elected officials, our legislators, the county assessor's office to really understand that as much as possible. And those relationships have improved over the years to help us get that information to turn those mountains from uncertainty into clarity. But how long will this, in devising this, will it be a guiding document for us?
It's a great question. And it's hard to answer. I think to some extent the feedback will determine it, but I think it's fair to think in a 7 to 10 year band. We think about 2030, so 6 years, but and the reason for that is we know in 2027, thinking about LIPA, we might have another significant shift or development. And so we want to think out a few years after that. So really it's driven by the funding, of course, the amount of time required to complete those projects. But we also don't want to go too long because I do think the constraint will actually lead to the solution. So if we put a cap on it at 10 years, that might actually, kind of force us to figure it out. So I feel that is a responsible way. Of course, that might change up or down a little bit. And I'm sure on that list, and I know it was so dense and there's some redundancy there too, we'll eliminate and combine some projects too.
Hi, I'm gonna go this way. Oh, did you want to go? Rich, go ahead.
More as a matter of clarity or a point of information for the public, for you to just talk a little bit more about the energy performance contract in terms of, the goal of the contract is to basically pay for itself. So can you just talk to the point about the term over which that has to happen, when the clock starts, and how we're monitoring whether it's actually happening or not?
18 years is the payback period to recoup, to get to the end of the payback time. Measurement and verification happens after we complete all the projects. It's coming up very soon. And that's where the ESCO, our folks at Ecosystems, come in and they put various measuring devices in. They look at our BMS systems. They look at everything and they gauge. They're taking our utility bills to match what they were before to what we're doing now. They take all of that into consideration, compile a report, and report back to us. And as we stated in the presentation, if they do see anything glaring that's not meeting a goal, obviously we'll we'll work together to try to figure that out and see if it's set points for boiler operation or what the culprit is.
Question two, related to that. When we first started talking about this a couple of years ago, the issue about air conditioning the buildings was tied into this. And at the time, the idea of using ductless systems, new systems in the middle school and the high school was proposed, and I thought that was a good idea. But I also thought at the time it was a good idea to do in the elementary schools as well. So now I know at the time that the decision was made, we did it because it saved money. But the units that were put into the elementary schools were units that were there to begin with, that were in the middle school, that were in the high school, and some of them are older, not necessarily so efficient. How is that working out right now? I mean, my concern isn't, immediate. My concern is 2-3 years down the line, what are we looking at?
We use the savings from the lighting and all the some of the energy savings to pay for the air conditioning here at the high school, here at the middle school and at the high school. There was only so much in that pot, so we had to make other decisions, and the decision at the time was to move the window air conditioners over to where they are. They are working. They are much better than nothing, obviously. We would like the better, more robust air conditioning, the more efficient, but for now, that's our means of cooling the spaces. And I've seen an impact walking around myself on how the students, the learning environment is so much better. We're not moving systems around to accommodate special needs people anymore. It was such a positive. We would have to look at funding somehow, putting the better air conditioning systems into those. And we did talk about that when we were planning the energy performance contract, how we would fund and start to programmably put in the better air conditioning systems in those spaces. So that would be part of this discussion in the planning for the future and prioritizing, because those Windows units don't last forever, but they're of an age where as they're staggered in age and performance, so as they start to go away, it won't be a huge expense each year to replace one and keep things going until we can put those better systems in. Yeah.
One thing, just a simple add-on. I think one way we've thought about this at the elementary schools is first putting in air in large spaces. So our gymnasiums, cafeterias, I think, some of that is done already, but I think that would be the first phase of work. But we will include that on the list. I think some of the large spaces are on that list, but making sure that the HVAC, the central air, so to speak, is on there too.
Marianne? Thank you for the presentation. Construction is near and dear to my heart, year 11. And it's a lot of work, and we've been through a lot of different permutations. I think we really need to look at our demographic studies and come up with a plan on how we're going to utilize the buildings, because there may be some shift based upon how we're going to utilize the buildings based upon the future enrollment that may impact what we decide to do physically with the spaces. So I think first we have to understand where we're heading in terms of space utilization before we make any major decisions. I do agree that we should be looking at the grounds in terms of the fields as well as to what makes sense. As part of that, I do want to point out that we have a person from the community on our construction steering who is helping us in terms of what the soil content is and the water tables where the track is in an effort to try and determine if what kind of surface to put down. We may find, who knows, that that's just not the right place for a track, since two tracks have, one failed completely and one had problems since I'm here. That would bring up a whole nother issue if you're going to move a big field down here or a track down here, parking, right? So you'd have to, there's no parking here for those kind of events. So, I mean, I think that we really have to think carefully about this. I think we, as a board and as, with the help of our people on a construction steering, I think we need to prioritize this list, even before we put it out to the public a little bit more. You know, what is really feasible in terms of cost? What is really the most urgent projects? I don't want to tell the public, oh, gee, you may be getting another turf field, only to tell them we're removing the septic tank because it's about to collapse, right? I mean, I think we really need to have more information before we start asking the public for its input, because the list will, in some fashion, based upon our 5-year study, will sort of give us even more prioritization than what we have now. In terms of EPCs, I was a little surprised because I know the boiler work we've done and the controls work we've done over the years. This is our second EPC since I'm here. Part of that was controls. I was a little surprised that the additional controls work was not included in that EPC, because that would be a savings area. And maybe as we're looking at those systems, maybe that's something we think about doing, another type of energy performance project. I would also like to reiterate what I've been saying for a long time, and I was so happy when we started putting people from the community on our construction steering. You have a lot of talent in this neighborhood. You have some major mechanical contractors living right here. If you're looking at mechanical systems and HVAC, there are people who do this for a living every single day. And I would think that it might be helpful to invite them in and look at the system. Certainly the split system is, I think, really the way to go in these buildings, because you don't have the piping that you would have to do for other types of HVAC systems, and they're quiet. It's a technology that wasn't really used that widely. They were mostly Japanese and European utilization until recently here. When we're talking about old buildings, like the one here, like the Glenwood Landing garage, I really think we should be looking about how we're using that space. And it may be more cost productive just to take the damn thing down and put up a prefab building there, depending on the use. Because obviously a building that was built for a garage has certain requirements for buses, that height requirements that may not be efficient and may not be what we need for the purpose, right? And to start repairing something that old and trying to bring it up to code, I don't even know if you could bring it up to code, honestly. So, I mean, I really think we should be looking at, maybe it would be better just to, think about changing that. I would like to pitch for the high school locker rooms. I've been talking about this for 11 years, locker rooms and bathrooms, and the need to accommodate, right? And it's the problem is there. We need to make sure we're granting these kids privacy, that we're meeting their needs, and certainly that high school locker room, it needs to be done. And it was cut from the budget. In fact, we cut the air conditioning in the elementary schools to redo the locker rooms, and then we had to cut the locker rooms. So, it, like you said, I mean, Dave is right. We could not have anticipated a pandemic, rising interest rates, and the rising costs. But I think in hindsight, we probably should have looked back before we did what we were doing and said, okay, maybe we don't, there's some spaces I think that through the pandemic, maybe are not going to be as well used as we thought they were going to be. I would also like to think about what we're doing on the outside in terms of aesthetics as well and long-term maintenance, right? So we really can't use weed killers on grounds that are occupied by children, right? But maybe we can look at what type of vegetation and plantings that would be there that would require less maintenance than grass and would take the space where weeds would normally go. You have landscapers who could, I'm telling you, I do it all the time. I call it the landscaper or the tree people. Can you bring me a load of wood chips? And we throw them down, and that takes care of our weeds. There are natural ways to prevent the weeds, but I think it really entails us actually doing some real landscaping design work. It was a 4-year project on the front entrance, 3 different designs of the high school. I'm hoping we could do it much more efficiently, and we do have landscape architects right in the district who helped us before. Maybe they could help us again in terms of what is easy to grow. One of the things that I was taught when I was landscaping my house is to go to the go to Bailey's Arboretum and see what's a natural plant and talk about what would be a natural ground cover that would make our buildings pretty, control the weeds, and not be toxic. I think we need to talk about the schoolhouse in terms not only of the glass on it, but what concerns me with the schoolhouse is the coming and going between the different buildings, right? We spent all this money on security, on having one way in and one way out, but kids are going in and out. And then if you do the same thing in the Victorian, I mean, it's not as bad because they would go in and out the front entrance. But I think using the schoolhouse, I mean, my kids had classes in there, but I just, if you're talking about security, that is a breach of security, having those kids going in and out. So I think you're going to have to think, if you're reimagining uses, is that really, after we spent millions of dollars on security boots, how we want to be utilizing that space, kids opening and closing the doors, and you have to leave the doors unlocked for them to get back in again. Bleachers, surprisingly, I know people complain about them, but when we price them out, are extraordinarily expensive. So I don't know what we do about that, but certainly things like our flooring, our gym flooring, those are small projects that we could probably fit into the budget. Maybe we should be thinking about what has been suggested, sort of leaving a space there for athletic projects, doing one floor at a time. And then if you're going to be using those gym floors for other things, we have to think about what surface we're putting in, because I know that we did not do a wood floor on Glenwood Landing. We did a composite floor for the reason that it was softer on the kids' feet, but it's not going to give you additional auditorium space because it's not regulation if you needed to have a game there. So there's a lot to think about. It's going to be an ongoing discussion. I look forward to it. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa Cashman.
These are some dense and helpful comments that I wish I thought of some of the things that the trustees ahead of me said. So thank you. Thanks for this excellent presentation. I also serve on construction steering, which has been in education the past year and a half. I especially found it helpful, the post-bond analysis, the learning that we took from it. I agree that taking a smaller scope and smaller bites allows us, not that the projects that we took on for the bonds weren't scrutinized, but it just gives us an opportunity to really assess on a deeper level and be more measured moving forward. So I thought that was really great that you're doing that. I think agreeing with what Trustee Russo just said, but in a sort of a different tack, which is in addition to evaluating the functional use of spaces, adding to our post-analysis, are the spaces that are renovated or even unrenovated serving the intended purpose post-renovation? You know, I'm hearing that perhaps there's opportunities, particularly with it for our special needs students that are getting services. Are they able to be held in private areas? Do we have the facilities that we need? Now that we have pre-K, do we have the space that we need? And are all the intended spaces being used to the purpose that we had designed? So I think a post-analysis, when the dust settles, is also maybe something to be considered. I think I'm kind of all over the place they're numbered, but they're not sequential necessarily, logical. I do think that the community is counting on us for leadership for thinking about these things. So it's fantastic the way that you had it. I agree fully with Trustee Ludmar that having some numbers, even rough numbers in terms of like, this is a now I'm thinking in terms of colors, but this is something that can be assigned to a budget. This is something that can't be assigned to a budget. That allows us a little bit more understanding of the types of ways to fund things potentially, because it's a different way to approach priorities as well in terms of how the efforts that we have to go into it. I think in terms of, I know we just put in a turf field, but we know that has a lifespan that is counting down. And so I think about replacing that field. And so I would be proud to put a capital reserve for that next field to the community. Like, this is not something we want to whittle away money. We want to be so forward thinking that we're thinking about our athletic infrastructure today for 10 years from now, so that we're not in a similar circumstance that we were to try and build that, and we can add other athletic infrastructure. But I would be happy to support that as a trustee, and other infrastructure in terms of capital reserve. I think it's the smart thing to do to tell the community this is something that if and when there's extra money, we are slowly saving to think about the rainy day and the needs that we have. So I know we've been sheepish ostensibly. I mean, I assert that. I don't know if that's true, because the elections are contentious. The budget has passed by small margins. These are facts that we're living with. But having said that, the community did approve our changes to our existing capital reserve to maneuver. I think they're savvier and savvier locally. And I think the understanding of why these are needed, given our fiscal constraints, is even more present. That's my opinion. I think I love thinking about septic, like all of us. And I would, especially since you're going to Albany on Monday, say that with what is going on in the environment and the funding that's available in the Environmental Bond Act, I don't know if that's a source of funding for doing this, but Nassau County for homeowners is allowing grants for upgrading the infrastructure. And we are a harborside community. So failing septic is a direct threat to where we live. And so the need is present and active. I think that we have a huge case for getting support for upgrading that infrastructure. And that's something that we should be asking loudly for, to help build that. I said it before, but I think it's really important. I loved hearing Trustee Russo talk about native species and trying to incorporate that. I think that that's something that we could build into our curriculum, that the importance, especially, I mean, I'm wearing lots of hats because my day job has to do with the environment, but I think a harborside community really has to be thinking about native species, the root system, groundwater. We depend on our sole source aquifer. Longer root systems are helping to preserve that. So what we do with our very vast amount of real estate that we own makes a difference to the ecology. And so in thinking about that, it's cost effective, it's less maintenance, it's helpful for the environment. So to the extent that we can deploy, grass is useless to an extent. I mean, unless it's being used for athletics, but the open spaces that are not can serve us, and it can also serve as an educational purpose. That it can really be helpful in terms of building that into the curriculum. In my humble opinion. I will echo what has been said by the trustees before me, that aesthetics are so important. It feels good to walk into a building that looks good. It feels great to drive past an investment that you're making in a community that looks cared for and tended with love. We have some great glaring opportunities that have already been stated to just put some paint on. And I think it could be relatively low cost and very high impact. We've already talked about some came up during the meeting that some audience members tonight were at today. And I speak in construction steering about the E3 sign. I'm not afraid to say that is a pet project of mine, to see that upgraded. Even some fencing. I mean, there's a beautiful matching style fence that announces the middle school that nobody sees because you see that E3 sign that is just not in great condition. So I think even putting that in front of it, with some fencing behind, because I know it serves a functional purpose. So we can't just eliminate that piece of, I don't know what it is. So I think that those are my comments. Again, I know this is important work that we cannot, we really, the community is depending on our leadership in this, particularly in this time of fiscal crisis, to be thinking about our infrastructure and making sure that we are leading and giving the information and taking care of things. Right. And so I would be proud to explain how the best way to do that is when, and even if it's hard.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Trustee Mosca.
To do is look at me, right? Yeah, as you say, Lisa, it's dense information coming from each of us, including those who've been on the board the longest and have incredible overview and experience on construction steering. But first, I have to echo the thanks. This was a great presentation, very concise, despite the denseness. I did like that how you moved through it, and echo all of the applause you've already gotten. So I'm going to go in the order that I wrote things down, and then also comment on some of the things I've heard, because a lot of them are the same points I wanted to make, but I'd like to add my own 2 cents to them. But I just wanted to start, I thought it was really interesting, a couple of the lessons learned that you talked about that haven't been mentioned yet, that I starred on my notes. I think the before and the after of the end user experience is really critical, involving the users of the spaces in a deeper way. I think, not just an initial meeting with the architect without any sense of anything beyond what, people are thinking about. Not only doing that, but getting them into the process a little bit more regularly, so that they can put, say, well, actually, this isn't going to work for me. We all are in the community, and hear comments about now the people who are in the spaces who love them, who are thrilled and honored that things are so much better. But there's some, in terms of actual use, sometimes there are things have slipped, from where they were, and people have had to be very creative to make it work. So I think both getting that involvement early on and what you called your final surveys, to ask people, okay, at least in this project, if you didn't have enough of a say initially, what's the experience like now? How have you been able to accommodate what maybe felt like problems in the first semester that you've been using the space now. How are you doing with it? And is there some low-hanging fruit that can make it even better? I just think that's a community that we need to also make sure we're paying attention to, and that directly affects how the students experience it too, of course. I did want to ask, okay, so now I'm going to insert a question. John, I'd like to go back to the EPC discussion and just understand just a little bit more. You mentioned there's an 18-year payback period, and then you talked about the review that the Ecosystem company?
Ecosystem. yeah.
Okay, and all the analysis they're going to do, which we're going to see at some point in the next, 6 to 9 months, maybe, something like that.
Somewhere along the line, yes.
So I'm trying to get, how does that fit into the 18-year payback? When did the 18 years start ticking? And
It's coming soon as we finish the projects, but they're still tweaking and closing out the final little pieces.
Okay.
Once we get through that, the measurement and verification will start, and we meet with them every Friday as a Zoom call, just to monitor progress. And we're actively working. They'll let us know when that's going to start, and we'll definitely share that with everybody once that period starts.
so an even more basic question though about what it means that there's an 18-year payback. Is that some sort of guarantee that Ecosystems has given us that within 18 years you will get payback on this pile of expense?
Right. So
Okay.
we wouldn't have a project approved by state ed if that 18-year payback was not vetted, approved, and analyzed by not just our folks, but the folks at SCD.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So it's incumbent upon them, if the analysis shows that the payback isn't proceeding at a certain pace, changes may have to be made.
On the hook if
Yes, the hook.
they said, we're going to do this and this measure is going to result in this, and it doesn't achieve that.
Okay.
But on the same token, if we said we're only going to run the air conditioner from this time to this time, and now we're running it late, or starting it early and running it later, it's upon us to adjust and meet that. So there'll be some back and forth. We've been in a energy performance contract with Honeywell since 2008. So we've worked through this measurement and verification with them. It's a separate, older EPC, but we're meeting those goals each year and working with them. That one's coming to the end, and then this one will start.
It's cool. So, okay, great. So you've got some really good experience to go on, but okay, I'm going to let that go. I have a couple more questions, but it's for another time.
Just say one thing, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
please.
Mr. Pappas had the great idea of having Ecosystems come to this meeting. Unfortunately, they were not available. So we are going to try. I know I use board meeting time like I use instructional time as a teacher. We don't have a lot of it, and I take a lot of it. So we're going to try and fit it in maybe before the end of the year, if not as we round up our next year's meetings, so they can come and talk to you about it and answer those questions too.
It'd be wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's see. That was EPC. Give me a second here. A very small question, just one little thing that popped out at me on the list. You mentioned the fence on Glen Cove Avenue for the high school. Is there a fence there now that I just have never noticed before?
It's so bad looking, it's camouflage. No, it's an oldie and not a goodie. There is some shrubbery in front of it, so you might not see it.
Yes, that's it. I see the
yeah,
shrubs. But
and
we're talking about the same space where we will be putting a sign as well, right? But that's the strip.
that's
that
the
you're
strip,
talking
but
about?
going north on Glen Cove Avenue
Okay.
on that east side, on the high school side. It keeps going until the second entrance of the teacher's parking lot. And as you get closer to that second entrance, that's where it's less covered and you see it.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest, that was a personal pet project for me, kind of like the E3 sign. We all did, based on our roots, we see different things, but that is one where I think if we replace it, it could have a high impact visibility. But I don't think, and I haven't really talked to Mr. Hall about this, I think it would be kind of complicated. The parking lot's right there. So we'll do more analysis.
I think that could tie in with the comment I'm going to make in a minute. But first, I wanted to mention, and I just can't get my darn new tool here to scroll. I also want, Lisa, Trustee Cashman mentioned, as I expected her to, how important the septic systems are. It's something that's certainly on my mind as well. It was a concern when we opened the capital reserve to use some of that money. I was, that was initially established partly for septic systems, and it just, worries me just as a homeowner too. That's my level of understanding, of course, not on an institutional level, but when something like that fails unexpectedly, or maybe not unexpectedly, it's huge. It's going to be a huge expense. Whereas if you've anticipated it, presumably you can maintain it at a much lower cost. So I just hope that is staying strongly in mind, and I love the idea of it being on the radar when the Albany trip happens. So then I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that others have said. I did love listening to both Trustee Ludmore and Trustee Russo and their years of experience coming from construction steering, which actually is not a committee I ever wanted to volunteer for, but over the years, it's fascinating listening to you guys, and it sounds like a great gig. I liked Dave's suggestions for organizing the list. I thought those were really well thought out, and just in general that that is a big piece of what I had starred too, was where you talked about organizing it for proposals. But before we even get to that level, thinking about how to compartmentalize some of these, or how to group some of the things you're talking about. I was really intrigued by the down the hill field idea, which I never really thought about specifically, but that whole concept of just, that sense of frustration that, what do we do about this lighting issue? It's a push and pull that's gone on for years. But that's a great, outside the box sort of idea. Do we have any spaces? That's an intriguing one, although I totally agree. The first thing that comes to mind is parking and other issues. But I love that sense that anything should be on the table to try to figure out some of these issues. I realize that we're probably not telling you anything you haven't thought about, but thanks for letting us riff on this.
Oh, it's real. I decided not to take notes because I'm going to watch the video, because they're all important, the feedback, of course, student achievement, but this is one where really I'm going to transcribe and go through. So there's a lot of new.
There really is.
I do want to say just one thing on that. We did talk a little bit about that athletic advisory, I think the first meeting in the fall, about the turf down there. It's a great idea. And the lights, the one thing is the track. So then, Marianne's point too about perhaps just moving that complex, parking would be the issue.
Yes. I think the last point I want to make is an area that I think of myself as having a little bit of expertise in. I did study it for a degree. And this question, the issue about landscaping, I think has a lot of exciting, also creative aspects to it that could be explored at relatively low cost. Absolutely native plants and other possibilities, for reducing our water consumption, among other things. But the idea of using local expertise and extending that to perhaps a landscape architect, and I do want to emphasize the word architect as opposed to landscape designers. We all think we're landscape designers, but I think that what a landscape architect could bring to the process is a broader design perspective that could it would have possibilities like, for instance, we have, 5 campuses. Maybe as we're thinking about beautifying each of them, not only things like native plants or design that would make maintenance easier, but also a design that might bring some uniformity to say that while we celebrate the differences of each of our schools, we are one district. We have a North Shore view, and we talk a lot about, North Shore, that we want, that's what we want to project. So what we might want to do is have, certain design elements that are consistent on every single campus. And I think that's just the kind of thing. And having a landscape architect do that for the district as a whole would also enable then presumably cost savings, because we'd be buying, plant material or various other in bulk. I mean, I know the purchasing is already not something I need to comment on. The idea of that Trustee Cashman floated about bringing some of the planting thoughts into a curriculum, it had occurred to me too. I wondered if this is the kind of thing that BOCES may have a program on, or would consider. I mean, I don't know if we ever work with them on that front, but to me, it seems like a great idea for a new BOCES program, some kind of landscape design effort that would start at bringing the students into it as well.
Look at,
Farmingdale.
Farmingdale,
has a big program, and you may be able to do it through the dual enrollment program.
Also, Cornell Cooperative Extension, a million ideas there. I mean, yes, certainly these exist. So I just wanted to get them out on the table and put them into the mix. So I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice President Colasiopa.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the thought you put into the presentation. Obviously, I thought the breakdown was very helpful of, the most urgent needs. And I really do appreciate my fellow trustees' ideas as well. And some of my questions were already asked. So in the interest of brevity, I'm going to try not to repeat them, but I really do want to just say that I agree with what's been said, and, hope that you'll take that forward. So I just have a few specific questions. For air conditioning, you said that most of the classrooms in the elementary schools are covered. It's the large areas that aren't. So are all classrooms, do they all have air conditioning now, or are there some that don't? Still some that don't?
Wherever we could fit a room air conditioner, we put one in. Where you won't see one is like the wood shop here, because it's too large for a window AC unit. We did have a component for an alternate in the bond. The funding would not allow us to carry that alternate. So, but for the most part, all of the classroom spaces, save maybe a smaller room that we couldn't get a split unit in or a window unit in, but and then the larger spaces. But we did a really amazing job, my staff installing, the maintenance staff installing all of those large room air conditioners that they took out of the high school and middle school and put into the elementary schools last year. If you walk around, you could see every classroom window has a unit protruding.
Okay, good. I guess I was just picturing like that one lone class, and one third grade class doesn't have air conditioning. I started to feel badly. Okay, well that's great. And also related to that, I guess I have a question about ventilation as well. So during COVID, we talked a lot about the MERV 13s, and I'm assuming like this, when we put new air conditioning in the middle school, it included the ventilation system, correct? Or am I misremembering? The univents?
We left the univents that were in the classroom in place and installed a cassette air conditioning unit in the middle of the room. That unit is equipped with a MERV 13 filter, but the main ventilation unit is unchanged from what was there.
I'll tell you, the reason I'm thinking about it now is just I feel like everybody is sick. Like you keep hearing about teachers out, students are out. It just feels like more people are sick than before. And I just want to make sure, like, when we talked about these ventilation systems, I didn't think that nobody was going to get sick, obviously, but I did think that it was going to, improve the ventilation and improve that passing of germs somehow. So are we sure that, that it's working up to speed? Is there anything more we should be doing? Is this just a problem that the whole world is having? I don't know, but it just seems like, it's an issue.
I'm a member of an association of other buildings and grounds directors. And when COVID hit, North Shore, to my knowledge, is the only district that went around, sent a testing and balancing company around at a decent cost, but to measure and verify that all the ventilation units were pulling in the required amount of air when equipped with the MERV 13, with the new MERV filters, 13 filters. That was important because, you just put that filter in because that's what everybody wants or that's what the recommendation is, but then you throttle down the amount of air coming into through that unit. So it was very important for us to measure and verify that putting that filter in had a very good reason to have that, but we wanted to make sure we were bringing in the required amount of air. And then when we discovered the units that were marginal or not, or right on the fringe, that's where our repair reserve project that we're doing right now, our HVAC repair project, came in to just further make sure that any units that were on the cusp of maybe not being right there could be brought up into the same standards of the rest of the units. So to my knowledge, I don't know any other school district that went through those lengths to do that. So thank you for the board and the community for supporting that.
So the testing and balancing was complete, and we are confident that it is working. Okay. I do agree. I'm not going to say too much about it, but the final, I guess my only question about that is, what is your process? How are you going to glean that feedback from the end users, from the teachers, from the people who are, using the building? I mean, even this room, like, we are usually freezing, and I am very, very hot today. So, I guess, there are still, I just feel like if that's happening here in this room, what's happening in the classrooms, and how are we asking for that feedback?
I think right now we are kind of waiting for the bond work to be finished. The problem is it's lagging. I will tell you, we do get feedback unsolicited. I'm not complaining about from more of those problem areas. Like, I think some of the areas have taken a while at the high school, but I do know our principals get feedback, and we will discuss that at the principals meetings. But I do think one thing that Carol, Jamie, and I plan on doing this spring is visiting each building in a building meeting to talk about a few things: the budget issues that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, the North Shore journey and their conceptualization of that, and what it means for them, and are we on the right track? Does anything need to be changed for the end of year report? And then about the construction as well. So those three prongs that we talked about in the presentation, and then maybe sending a survey. I know we do a lot of Google surveys, but we're thinking about using other tools like Thought Exchange or other better tools. But doing that after we have the building meeting, and we do want folks to see. I think seeing us is important, knowing that we really do care. But I do know the principals do a great job of hearing that feedback. But that's kind of what we're thinking there.
And just related to that also is bathrooms. I've heard that, especially in the middle school, but maybe in the high school as well, just they are not as clean as you would want them to be. And I feel like we just did all this work, and we have these new beautiful bathrooms, and kids will be kids, obviously, but is there a way to, I don't know how you police a bathroom, but just to try to keep, I think about it not only with bathrooms, but even with the turf field, when I see like water bottles thrown on it. Like, we have this beautiful new turf field and people are throwing garbage on it. Those kinds of things. Like, how can we just like create a culture where those kinds of things aren't happening?
Good question. Good question.
I know.
Well, it's interesting. I know this is incidental. A couple of years ago, the Manhasset track was closed, so I had to go run in Herrick. So it's the closest one. I was embarrassed to run here and have you all see me run around the track here, but they have security there. I feel like we've talked about this with the tennis courts. You know, like some districts do have security there. And so that might be a mechanism there. It could be costly though. But I think we do have monitors. We've kind of beefed up monitors here. We have a dean, so those folks can definitely help here at the middle school. And I think with John, and I just want to thank John for everything he does. He's very understated, especially during the post-COVID. It's been extremely hard for him with the bond. It's been like a perfect storm. But he's also very short-staffed. So in addition to the inflation, you know, civil service and finding folks for all positions, including teaching positions, has been really hard. So we have unfilled positions. I do think that contributes a little bit, but that is great feedback. I think the great part of that it's such an important question, but the cultural piece, I think that is the key, and I think that relates to a lot of the comments that we heard this evening from the board, because it's symbiotic, right? It's like if you talk about the broken glass theory in New York City and things like that, but those spaces, when kids see those spaces clean or up to date, it inspires them, it creates a culture. So how do we turn it back that other way? That is something I need to think about. And it's something I think our principals can help with, certainly, you know, our faculty and, you know, our deans and our assistant principals.
That may be unemployed too.
Oh, yes.
You can stand outside the bathrooms.
Fear is always a factor, especially the middle school.
Thank you for that thoughtful answer. I just have a couple more. So in wellness, we talked about, in the last couple of wellness meetings, we talked about like a wellness room. I didn't really see that. I saw like an athletic kind of wellness room, but I didn't really see that. I'm not sure if that's something we want to put on the list. I also know we've talked about in the high school, the counseling center, like frosting the glass, because it's right now kind of like a fishbowl where you can see into it. I'm not sure if I saw that on the list. I just want to make sure like we're not operating in silos and that's getting back to you.
John is getting a price for the frosting.
Middle school.
And I think for the middle school, so another item that we took out of the original bond was the counseling center in the main office in the high school, which was going to be kind of similar, and we needed to take that out. But I do know CASA is helping us to re-envision the space in the middle school we looked at, and with the existing space at the high school, we're looking at that as well to turn it into a wellness center. We talked about the frosting with them, and John is helping with that. And so we're kind of right now relying on that partner to help us. They've been amazing. We did a tour with the CASA executive board with Mr. Doherty. They've looked at other schools. But that is something I think to add to the list.
And then also, one of the things on the agenda today is the new like pole vault system for athletics. And we talked about, I had actually asked the question when I saw that, and then Trustee Russo asked the question at Athletic Advisory just for a list of, and this goes to Trustee Cashman's point about, we know everything has an end, everything has its useful life. So just planning on if something lasts 12 years, then in 12 years, how are we going to pay for replacing it? And what does that list look like from an athletic standpoint so that we know what we're working with. I think I have one more point, I'm sorry. Just about revenue generation. So I know we can't just put like, MGM on our field and have, a company pay for it. But I know you had mentioned that there might be other ways of maybe getting donors, like large organizations to contribute to those kinds of big projects. And I'm just wondering if you have any more information about that. I don't mean to put you on the spot, so if you don't, that's okay too.
No, not at all. I need to update the board on, and maybe tonight, on Revenue Generation Committee. We've had a couple of meetings. It is a small, tight group, but really great thinking, and we're building threads, really focused threads. I need to do more research on that, but we can take a donation from, let's say, I'll just use RXR as an example. I'm not putting them on the spot unless they're listening, and we will take the donation. But we can legally, take that donation and say donated by. So, for them, it's we can't actively advertise, and we do that with our families. Like I'm thinking of the families, Cleveland Landing and other schools have done landscaping work. We have the names there. But even for corporate sponsors, we're allowed to do that. I've worked on signage in the Little League in my town, and Northwell has done some great stuff for us there. So we are allowed to do it. That is kind of the extent of it, though. So I think for them, it's more of, really working with the community to support it, and they get a little recognition. And now you're really advertising, but if it says donated by, and there's the recognition for the donation. So it is kind of a fine line.
Right, well, just something to keep us posted on. And just regarding native plants, my last comment, I promise. It's funny, you go to Florida and their grass is crabgrass. Like, that's their grass. It's all weeds, right? And I remember looking into this for my house, and then I never followed through. But there are those kinds of grasses like zoysia, where it's like a weed, but it still grows, like it gets green, right?
Zoysia would be the only one. I mean, really, it is a big, big problem. I'm sure John knows all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's virtually nothing that can survive an athletic field other than grass.
That was going to be my question. Yeah. Can something like that survive?
There really isn't.
Okay.
That's the traffic problem is the real.
David?
I want to clarify one thing, just for being on construction steering at the outside of the process. I think the trustees have very rightly said that we need to be sure about getting input on the front end to make sure the user spaces are what we expect them to be. But we did that quite a bit, right? The people who are using the spaces that we had extensive meetings with the faculty and the staff that were going to be in those rooms. I think in part it is a lot to ask a fantastic teacher to also be a visionary architect and be able to understand necessarily how a space is going to look. But I wouldn't want to give the impression that we were just sort of like building these spaces at an architecture school and then saying, "Great, here you go," and a teacher saying, "Well, the blackboard's behind the desk, I can't reach it." Not that anyone uses a blackboard, but you get my point. And so I think it's a good lesson. But I think one of the other lessons, which I'm not sure I'm ready to articulate in this way, but input is hugely valuable, but potentially also, I guess I just will articulate it this way, recognizing that if you ask 100 people, you will get at least 100 opinions is also probably a good lesson of this project as well.
Yeah, I just want to sort of team on a lot of changeover in administration, both on the building level and on the central office level. From the time this was done. So we started thinking about this bond when Dr. Melnick was our superintendent. And we actually put together a much smaller bond because what we've generally had done over the years was not go over 20 million, right? And we did discrete work. And what that bond was really focused on was locker rooms, bathrooms, those boilers, those kind of, very solid things. And there was some resistance to that. And then we actually went to, who was on that field trip with us? I don't know if anyone's still here. We went to Bronxville and we went to Chappaqua, and we looked at their 20th century classrooms. You were on that trip too? I only went to Bronx because I worked there, so I just left for an hour. So we looked at that space. But between the time we started first thinking about the bond, you had a lot of changeover. And in the middle of it, you had a pandemic. So I think the way we instruct even changed between the time we started thinking about this bond and the time we started doing the work. I think in my experience, having gone through the bond process twice because I was on the bond committee before I was on the board on the last bond that we did. I think where we made the error was we didn't have enough of the public involved. And I think there were some factors that some people were being listened to and others were not being listened to. And I think that had we had actually a more open way of doing it, like we did with Dr. Melnick the first time, I was involved with it. This was more of a closed committee. And even when it came to the committee, the items were already prioritized. So it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't think that we had involved the public in the sort of more global way we had done with Dr. Melnick. You know, and there are pros and cons to that. Like I said before, to a certain degree, especially now with the financial constraints, we or whoever is sitting in these chairs and you and John and Jamie will have to think about what are our most pressing needs and how are we going to fund them. And that's generally not the fun stuff. So
It's just, oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say one sentence, which is, I think, just building on what Mary Ann said, I think manufactured processes and outcomes aren't necessarily the best way to get community support, necessarily cultivate what the best solutions are. So a very organic process, I think, is what you're hearing from a lot of us.
I remember those meetings too. I think Dr. Smythe does too. And you've referenced them as a good model of like how it should work. Like you had 50 people in a room and you got on a table and it was you were fishbowled and mixed around, and it was really like democracy in action. It was really great. And I just wanted to say that's what I was thinking of with that bullet about the end user and the user input. We had so much turnover, faculty, but administration as well. Also thinking about, just because being there as a principal during that process for this bond, some of the questions that were asked. So there was some initial questioning just in the buildings with the architect and the interaction with the architect throughout the process. So that might be something to look at.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it really short. And I just really want to say that we have beautiful schools. And these schools are beautiful because generations of taxpayers have funded them, have invested in them. And I'm really glad we're doing this presentation tonight because it's not enough to invest in the schools, right? You have to continually invest in the infrastructure, the maintenance of it, the updates of it. And, you know, when I think about my own house, I'm overwhelmed by all the things that have to be done. And for you to think about a school like five or more than 5 buildings, it's overwhelming. So I thank you for that, John. I mean, it's incredible. When I looked at that list, you know, part of me thought it's not really about prioritizing each individual project. Like, where does the project fall? It almost feels like you need a list of questions or standards that help guide how you prioritize. So, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking like the ones that affect student and adult safety, like, should be first. Which ones are those, right? There's the original Glen Head elevator. I would think that would go there. Which ones then maybe affect programming and need to be addressed, right? Which ones then are important to students? So coming up with a list of ways to prioritize might then help everything shake into place in an equitable way. I'm also interested in, you know, we've gotten this pre-K money, right? We have all of these pre-K students. Is there a way to use any of that money for infrastructure? Is that a way for us to get is there a way to get grants to improve the facilities for the pre-K, and then maybe also we get the benefit of that?
Not really, because pretty much the funding that we get, we're limited. We're capped at using $5,400 per student. If let's say our community-based partner took half of that for tuition, then we could use the other half. There is expansion grant funding. It is hard for, like with a lot of these grants, districts like us to get. The state just did allow for the supplant, not supplement provision was taken away. So you could use both grants in tandem. So I don't know if we're going to get it for next year, but in the future, we can continue to apply, and that might then be an opportunity, but it would be tricky because of the way that grant is constructed. I was on a Zoom call, a webinar with Shelley Mayer, who's the Senate head of the Education Committee this morning with NISCUS, and she said they are trying to work on reformulating that basic UPK funding, but it would be hard.
And I will admit, I probably asked you this question like 4 times in the last year. I just keep waiting for a different answer. But all right, it is what it is. It's hard to imagine that they give you so little per student and then expect you to house the student, and it doesn't seem right. Yeah.
With inflation, yeah. And I do think, I'm hoping we're on the verge that, the supplement, not supplement, they just took that away. So that means we can use this different funding source for the first time. I don't think we're going to get that for next year. So we'll probably have a similar program, but maybe that $5,400 limit cap per student could be broken, because we can't use all the total amount of UPK funding. We just couldn't house all those kids.
Right.
We have a program of about 120 kids, so we never reach that top number. If we had more flexibility and could use more of those funds, then we could do exactly what you're saying. So but it's an excellent question, and that can help me focus in on what we do there.
Right. Great. Thank you very much for this presentation. Thank you, John. We always love having you here. And of course, yes, of course, Jamie and Dr. Z. All right, so now public comments. I will open the floor. Please name and town of residence. Oh, you can come down to the podium. Just come to the podium, name and town of residence. We ask that you don't refer to any specific students or personnel.
Hello. Hi. I'm Morgan Ross, and I am in Glen Head. I am here. I was really debating on if I was going to say anything, but this meeting has been so incredible. First, thank you so much to everyone here. I'm very impressed and just so moved that everyone here gives so much thought and their time to our children. So the reason I'm here, I'm going to keep it so short, is because I have a second grader in Glen Head. So we've been in the school district now for a couple of years, and I just wanted to bring to the attention of the board in a bit of a public forum, and maybe this shouldn't be public, maybe this could have been an email, as they say. I recently went to sign up my 4-year-old for the UPK program, which we all know is a sort of newer program. And I was told that he is not eligible based on his birth date by 2 months. And I was told that he was actually supposed to be in the program this recent year. So I am in a situation now where I didn't submit him, I didn't register him last year for the program, and he's no longer eligible for the program based on the birth date, but it doesn't coincide with my parental choice to put him in kindergarten at 5 turning 6. So I just wanted to let everyone know that, and I'm sure you do know, but just in case somebody doesn't know, or just in case it's, it's such a new program, that that the UPK registration is different from the kindergarten registration. And so it's not lining up with my thought process it's not lining up with the timeline of how I was going to put him into kindergarten.
Chris, that's a law, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, and I'm speaking as a father who redshirted, retained his two boys, and they did an extra year of pre-K. So I understand that choice, and I counsel many parents at Cecil Schools principal into doing that. So I do understand that. The grant funding that New York State gives us for this program is entirely based on the birth, the age, and it's from after December 1st through December 1st of that following year. I wouldn't mind you, please send me an email, and I just want to do a double check on that. And unfortunately, we have had that conversation with parents in the lottery because if your child is eligible for kindergarten, regardless of preference, and I do understand that, we cannot use the funds for that student. And that's what we're up against. And it's entirely grant funded. We don't have the ability to fund the program in our budget. But please do email me or call the office tomorrow. And I just want to take a double. I don't want to double check the birthday. Make sure that we're actually accurate in that assessment. That's important. That'll be the first step.
Yeah, that would be great. And I totally understand. And I also started doing some research once I figured this out. And I realized that I learned that, it is state funded as opposed to federally funded. And it's two different ways of funding. I did reach out to the Department of Education and the Department of Education, but specifically the Early Learning Department. I spoke with Jason Gish. Very lovely conversation, really informative. And I think where I'll end here is just that I spoke with him and I wanted to come here tonight because I think that there's possibly, going to be a group of kids that consistently fall into this little gap period for the UPK program lining up with kindergarten. And while there's parents like me, I know in the community probably this year that are going to just essentially try to figure out what to do next. This might also be something that is, going to happen over the years where there's a gap of kids or maybe a large gap of kids that are going to fall under this. And I understand that it's legislated. I read through the legislation as well. Oof, it is confusing to read through legislation. But I do think that there could possibly be room in the bigger picture to have it line up that the UPK program aligns with the kindergarten registration as well.
Thank you for raising this issue because it's really much bigger than your own child. Because if we have this pre-K program, my guess is we're gonna end up seeing many fewer kids who are redshirted, right? Which has an impact on who's in the grade, who's in the classroom, the age. It's actually like a very interesting, I'm a psychologist, it's a very interesting concept because so many children have been redshirted, right? That really does change the classroom, who meets the standards, who falls behind because of birth dates. It's very interesting. So maybe one solution, and it's not a solution for your kid, is to just communicate this issue to the community so that they know in advance that their child will either be eligible or not eligible based upon their decisions.
We do that with the registration, and we did because it does come up a lot, the question. So we did put the birth range on the postcard, but more we need to get more and better, admittedly.
Yeah. What people could do if they were aware of it is they could do the pre-K the year the child is eligible, get the benefit of the free pre-K, and then if they choose to do another year of pre-K, then pay for it privately, and then go back into the kindergarten system because they would not be required to register their child for kindergarten the next year just because they got the UPK, right?
Yes, if I could speak on that, sorry. Public speaking is really terrifying. So I do have notes here, but yes, part of that is the way that the system is currently set is that I would have had to put him into UPK last year at 3 turning 4, then give him a gap year, and then register him for kindergarten. Or something like that, or put him into, get him in there to get the free UPK and then take a year and not, or just put him in early altogether. And what I will say with my first child, I did start him in kindergarten at 4 turning 5. He was the youngest person in his class. He still is. He was 4 turning 5. And so in terms of kids starting at 5 turning 6, I just always knew I was going to do that for my second. And I just always assumed that it would align. So yes, when I got the postcard, and I kept looking at this date thinking, oh, but this doesn't, maybe I'm just not looking at it right. And I just assumed that it would align because I knew that it would be okay to have him start kindergarten at 5 turning 6. And also because I knew that my oldest was the youngest, and it seemed like that's a large percentage of children were starting at 5 instead of 4. And so this sort of makes you think that it's going to be the opposite, or should I do the opposite, or did I do it wrong? You know.
Thank you for coming, and we encourage you to email Dr. Z. Is very responsive. See, free things always have small print.
I'm sorry, please.
I'm sorry, no, I know I'm not even supposed to speak, but can we provide that feedback to the state?
That's what I was going to say. No, that's a great point. I think a lot of superintendents, a lot of districts are finding troubles with that. Like, so what Dr. McCary and I were talking about with the use of the funding, this is definitely another thing that has come up here, just in small North Shore. So we will communicate that as well. I have asked the question too, because it has come up to Jason, to other people in the state, to our community-based organization partners that we use, Scope and the Y. And unfortunately, the answer hasn't changed. But I do think we need to advocate to something perhaps like, you know, if it's the year before kindergarten, whatever your birth date is, that might be a more acceptable way to do it. So,
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you staying.
Thank
you. Yes. Any other public comments?
I'm Mike Conklin from Greenvale, and I'm here from the Booster Club, the Athletics Booster Club. I want to thank, mostly I want to thank A.D. Lang and the hiring committee on the recent coach hirings. I've received quite a bit of positive feedback from the athletic community on the choices. In addition, I want to thank the board, Dr. Z, for tweaking the coaching policy that falls under tutoring, as these changes gave the hiring committee a broader base of candidates to choose from. And without that, we probably wouldn't be where we are. Thank you. We appreciate the voice of our student athletes and the athletic community and the Booster Club being heard by the board that these changes came about. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? I will now close public comments, and we will move on to action 12. I will take action, it's personnel, 12A through G. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay, heard a second. Questions, comments?
Just a quick question that Mike made me think of. Do we actually have all of our coaching positions filled
Wait,
now?
this is not the time to ask that question.
It isn't?
Nope. You can bring it up in new business or old business. So where are we? Action 12A through G. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Action 13 and 14, we'll take it together. The budget amendment and the purchase of athletic equipment. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Thank you. Questions, comments?
Just that those polls that we're getting are going to very good use. These are track teams off.
Yes, amazing. All in favor? Okay, great. Action 15, approval of 2024-2025 school calendar. How exciting. This is the short form, not the long form. Motion. Any questions or comments? I will say I got a lovely letter from our resident today who's been sending me handwritten notes regarding his recommendations for the calendar. But today's letter was not just a letter, it was a package that included a book that he authored with his own poems that was signed to me. So I'd just like to thank him for that. And he's been following all of our calendar updates. So I know today he'll probably be very happy that we have it approved. And he's sorry he can't come. He was having some dental work done. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, excellent. Action 16, approval of contracts, A and B.
Motion.
Second. All right, thank you. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Thank you. Action 17, approval of special ed consultant agreement. And, I was gonna say, and action 18 are IEPs. Go ahead, now you can go. Second, okay. We slow down after 10 o'clock. Questions, comments? All in favor? Okay, excellent. Board committee reports. Who would like to go first? All right, I saw you first. Lisa Cashman.
Need a construction and steering report given what we just went through?
Excellent point.
No, right?
No,
No.
I think
Okay.
we're good. All right, good, pass. Lisa Cola.
Okay, so we met 3 times since our last committee report update. On November 20th, and we break up our topics into physical wellness, nutrition, and mental wellness. That one was supposed to be about physical wellness, but we were lucky enough to have CASA join us, and Allison Camardella and Kevin McGilloway, the president and vice president of CASA, came. And so they talked about their great work, how they're trying to reduce risk factors, trying to boost protective factors. I can't even speak after 10 o'clock. And support youth mental health. And we also talked a lot about the wellness centers, which is one of the reasons I brought it up in the presentation. And, you know, trying to figure out ways that we can create a wellness center, and, you know, they would like to help us. On December 18th, we met again, and we kind of brought physical wellness into it, even though nutrition was supposed to be the topic, because we got stuck with CASA, which was a great presentation, great discussion. So we followed up on the CASA discussion, and CASA did talk about funding small items like coloring books and fidgets, and kind of getting the ball rolling on the wellness. We talked about the counseling center and putting frosting on the windows, couches outside Dan and Reese's office. We talked about at the middle school maybe having a Friday night open gym, more pro-social activities for students. And we talked about the month-by-month themes at the elementary schools, which were great, like communicators and building positive relationships in September, stress, anxiety, and feeling overwhelmed in October, kindness and gratitude in November, respect of cultural differences in December. And we talked about the middle school, how, they are learning when to take a time out, how to identify stress and walk away, take a break, and how to reach out to a trusted adult. And the high school feel comfortable about asking for advice, also about keeping their mind and bodies healthy by exercising, and that the weight room, we talked about how the weight room is open Monday through Friday afternoons. And then we did talk about, we had a great nutrition discussion, and Alan Levin led that and talked about the great grant he received for a new turbo chef ovens, and how he's looking to implement a hot breakfast by the end of the year in the school.
The Turbo Chef oven is like the oven they use at Starbucks to heat your breakfast food. It's so cool, right? Yeah.
He talked about the Farm to Table grant in connection with Cornell Cooperative Program. And he talked about how he's the only Long Island director on this committee talking about, farm to table food. And somebody did bring up the lines in the middle school for lunch. So, just trying to figure out how to rectify that. And then just the other day, on Monday, we met again, and we talked about mental wellness, and we talked a lot about the new Therapy Dog and Therapy Dog Fridays and how successful the program is being, and now has been, and now everybody wants a therapy dog. So So we want to thank the middle school PTSO for funding Therapy Dog. And, you know, the high school wants to figure out how to maybe bring it for like around IB, AP testing. We talked about maybe the transition between elementary school and middle school and the Head Start program trying to incorporate the Therapy Dog. We learned about the Positivity Project in Seacliff School, which is an advisory program they're doing every morning until 8:45, and it's all about character development and the 24 character traits that align with our strategic plan and the North Shore Journey, and just teaching students how to build positive relationships. We talked about the Mindful Schools grant and the Successful Parent University that occurred on January 4th, and we talked about also doing another pulse survey to kind of reach out to not only students, but maybe faculty as well, to see how everybody's doing.
That was a very great update. Thank you. Who would like to follow that? Rich.
No. We had a safety committee meeting on Wednesday, the 17th, and we went through our agenda. So the first thing is emergency response plan. Altaris is looking at the current plan and getting ready for the 24-25 school year. The initial input was that they didn't anticipate any drastic changes. There may be some minor tweaking, but by and large, it should just be correcting certain things that change over time, members of the committee, those sorts of things. So there's no anticipation about any huge changes unless the state comes down with something that we're not expecting, which could happen. So we're on target for that right now, and every year in the spring, we'll get the preliminary draft. The committee goes through it, makes comments, gets edited, and the board will have the review process. I mean, it'll be the open hearing in July, I guess, and then we'll get it ready for the fall to send to the state. Next on the list, drills. We are up to date in all the buildings on the drills prior to the winter break. There are 8 required drills. All the buildings had them completed. So there are 4 more that have to be completed. And we were told that Seacliff actually did their second half of the year lockdown already, so they're a little bit ahead of the game. But the anticipation is there'll be no problem completing the required drills. And everything so far, the feedback that they've been getting has been fine. Training program. In terms of training, we had a CPR training course. It was not mandatory. We had 25 district employees take it, and it looks like we're probably going to offer another one because there's more interest for it, so that's a good thing. In terms of other training, we are pretty much on target with that as well. We're in terms of completing the program, the requirements, we are a little bit behind where we normally would be, only because, again, the state had thrown a few extra things in this year. So as a result, there's a little bit more involved, but nothing really to be concerned about. It. The anticipation is we'll be fine. Well, we had a lot of discussion of construction tonight. One of the things that was brought up at the meeting was contradicted tonight in the presentation. So we were told at the meeting that the hopes for the high school entry was going to be next week, but apparently that's not true.
I'll admit, I'm just learning from every 2 weeks we hear another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. So I might have overshot that. I don't know. But no. Okay, Johnson, no. Okay.
I appreciate that. And when I heard the February 1st, I didn't say anything, but I did roll my eyes. So because I didn't think that was going to happen. But that's neither here nor there. That's fine. In terms of, the discussion of window frosting for the guidance suite came up as well. So I guess it's come up in a number of different places. And the general consensus is the guidance office in high school 100% wants frosted glass. So it looks like we will be moving ahead on that, hopefully soon. Yes. Okay.
What?
Exactly. Well, that's why I said hopefully.
You could, like in my personal office, I have it half frosted. So the top is not frosted. So it's kind of nice. I like watch the birds fly by, but nobody can see them.
I will learn how to do the frosting first. We'd enjoy that.
Ventilation, everything, as was reported tonight, is going as anticipated. Measuring and balancing is done. Small area testing is going to be continued, periodically, just to make sure we don't have any problems. But by and large, we're in good shape with ventilation. Guest Wi-Fi. So a request was made, I guess, last year about the fact that when parents, other guests are in the buildings, you basically have no cell service in the buildings. So it's very difficult to get a message through. So the request was for, a guest Wi-Fi system to be put in, and Elliot did a good job with that. It's up and running. And again, apparently one of the parents on the committee said, I was in the building the other day and it wasn't working. So again, it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but it's certainly much, much better than it was. So thank you for that work.
Trustee Galati, I just want to say one thing, because we are working on it with something. Mr. Kane, I just spoke about this. It was up, and then this happened this week. We are trying to do simplify the sign-in process, because the way it was set up for security purposes, you had to go through a few steps. So now we're trying to do just almost like an automatic sign-in, and there are some security issues with that with our BOCES security team that manages our network. So Elliot is working through that. I'm getting the nod. That was accurate. Okay, good. Thank you. I just want to put that out. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's breaking news. I'm sorry.
That's fine. And the point was really stressed that it's a completely separate system from the district Wi-Fi. So there's not the possibility of having people coming in and hacking through the guest Wi-Fi system.
Use it. The guest Wi-Fi, can the kids use it? Because the whole part of the idea of having what we had was so that when they have their little Chromebooks, they're not looking at videos rather than what they're supposed to be doing in work. Let's go.
We have the man here, if that's okay.
Prize expert consult.
Come on down.
The comment is close it. This is a hard solution to solve, because to your point, kids can just join it. So you have to, at a minimum, filter at least. The other thing too is that we are in the business of managing minors. So we are bound by laws like Child Internet Protection Act for state aid and federal aid, and we have to filter at a minimum content that is deemed instructionally objectionable or disruptive. So for guest Wi-Fi, it has to be at least as strict as the kids' Wi-Fi, but more so because God knows who's coming into the buildings than joining our network. Even though it is, in fact, blocked off from the internal network, if you just miss something, someone's going to just do whatever on a weekend, and we're not just going to be aware of it. So you have to it's going to be a really unpleasant network to be on, honestly. Like, the best thing that you can hope for is you'll get cell phone service going out. And that's the point of it, right? The safety of it. We looked into other solutions, such as installing antennas and repeaters on top of our buildings. And I actually talked to John about that just tonight. I think it's a non-starter. but we're looking into like some repeaters in the buildings and ways to amplify the signal. But there was an incident. So, for example, an incident in Glenwood Landing happened a couple of weeks ago, and they claimed they were outside, and their district-issued phones could not reach T-Mobile. That's a problem we can't solve. You know, that's just the signal in this area is poor for some of the carriers. So, there's just going to be safety issues no matter how you accommodate for it. But in the building, at least, we can provide some kind of cell access. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Hope that makes it easy.
That was my first question, you know, if the parents get in, the kids can get in, right? I mean, that's.
But like I said, the network's going to be really unpleasant. Like you won't be able to do anything on it. That's fine.
You can use it
It's
to
fine.
text.
Yeah.
You know,
Texting
hey,
and phone.
you know,
It'll pass text messages. It'll
Good enough.
pass
Phone
cell
feed.
service. That's
Great.
really. Yeah, but like, and you know, we can't necessarily guarantee it'll be perfect. You know, like you can. I mean, and that's also the reason why when we built out, and one of the bond items was to put a phone, like a hardwired phone, in every single classroom. So every single room, with rare exception, has some kind of wired phone that you can call 911 from. Just dial straight up.
Right. Elliot, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting me speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other topic, security.
Another thing I have on the list that was discussed dealt with the ID badges. President McCarry has been advocating for a while now about having critical hotline put onto the back of the badges for student use. And we talked about putting stickers on and trying to come up with a plan. And at the meeting on last Wednesday, we were told that after looking into this carefully, they felt that there wasn't enough quote unquote real estate on the back of the badge to put anything else there, because they felt that the instructions for a lockdown, which are theirs, would really be the most important thing. So they're talking about now other ways to make those contacts available, readily available to students. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So the Legislative Affairs Committee actually has met twice since we last did. I'm sorry, did you guys need to? Has met twice since we last reported on committee reports. But I did want to start with, unfortunately, some late breaking news. One of our members has had a massive increase in job responsibilities and has had to resign. So we're just we haven't even had a chance to figure out if we're going to do anything about it. But we are pretty well staffed. So my own sense is we can get through the rest of the year until we're filling whatever positions open up for next year. But anyway, so we met back in December. That was really all about planning for the legislative breakfast, which I think we've already done some really good debriefing on that. And we met again about 9 days ago and reviewed all of the takeaways from the breakfast, including the fact that it was really excellent and all our legislators attended and there was excellent discussion. But we also had about 10 takeaways that I won't go through because we reviewed them at the last meeting, Dr. Z, thank you. And we also have all been sent that list. So what we did on the 16th was go through it with a fine-tooth comb, set up all of our subcommittees and assign specific people to each of the 10 takeaways. We talked also about in some instances, where there were instances where we should be coordinating with people like George Pumbar, we will be doing that. And people will start getting going on these activities any second. The other thing that came up after we did that was a proposal by our chairman, James Versacchi, for what he calls the model school apprenticeship policy. The committee has been discussing that a little bit over the last several months and took a vote to ask the board to consider making it a part of district procurement policy. So this could be something I bring up also in new business, but that presents just a question. How would we like that to be structured? Should it be a written proposal? Should it be somebody coming to the committee to present it? That is something LAC would like to do, or just come through Dave and me.
I would think that LAC would present that to Dr. Z. He would present it to the board in backup. So we have a chance to review it, and then we can, if you think it has merit, you can recommend that we have a conversation, small bullet point discussion topic.
Can you tell I didn't have time to consult with Dave before I gave this report, but thank you, Dave.
Only question I had on that is, and I think Mr. Versacchi said Syosset used to have policy. If that policy exists in another school district, I'm sure it does somewhere in New York State. So I'd like to see it.
A lot of information about it, so we'll pull all that together. He'll pull it all together. At this point, the only other item to report on that is that, on the meeting, is that James himself at least is going to join Dr. Z on the Albany trip next Monday. And our next meeting is on February 13th. Okay.
Athletic advisory?
Fill in if I missed anything. I think my notes aren't as good as wellness, but.
Thank gosh.
We met twice since the last update. We met on November 20th, where we got an update on open coaching positions, talked about the letter of intent signing in November and the favoritism policy. Then we met on November 22nd, just this Monday. We got an update on the open coaching positions. I think most are filled at this point, right? Was there one vacancy or no?
We have some spring positions that they'll be on the February 8th agenda. Baseball, and that's it. Yeah. And one assistant softball.
And they were, the consensus was they were filled with very high quality candidates. So we were pleased about that. We talked about standardizing the interview process, committee composition, and posting in more places to be more successful with this. We talked about the policy on favoritism, how it lays out a clear process to file a complaint if necessary. Talked about coaching and evaluation rubrics will help that as well. And then we talked mostly about spectator conduct policies and how to promote our conduct policies to both internal parents and fans, and also those coming from other districts. We talked about the middle school scoreboard. They're putting in a temporary one for now because there's a delay with the new one. Also waiting for word from Assemblyman Levine about funding for the new press box potentially. We also talked about status of the tennis courts. Do they need to be upgraded in any way? Could we get a new grant for a new quick start system? And the Booster Club, thank you very much, is giving us a new windscreen for the courts. And we also lastly talked about getting varsity athletes to mentor at the elementary schools.
Very nice.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to hear that you had the conversation about spectator and parent conduct. Is that something that is existing policy, needs to be reinforced? Is it policy? Is there for parents who obviously are spectators, but also have a slightly different role, is there something participatory in the understanding of that, like signing off?
That is exactly where we talked about. We started, and I think Don and I are going to work on something for the next meeting. We talked about where it lives. So there's some visitor and parent policies in the general code of conduct, not having to do with spectators, just in general, visitors to the building. And in the athletic handbook, that's where it lives on a couple different pages, like pages 23 to 26. But I'll put this in my next update also. And so we had a really good conversation about, do we do a sign off? We talked about signage. We talked about at the coaches meeting, the sports season meetings for the teams that the coaches have. We talked about the electronic signs. So we talked about areas where it could live.
Any other committee? Sure.
I can be really brief. The policy committee has met a couple times, including this week. Unfortunately, we were down one member, but I'm glad to see you feeling better. We spent a lot of time on most of the policies that we're addressing right now have to do with changes in New York State laws and have been pushed in changes provided to us by legal counsel. And those policies right now include homebound instruction for those students who can't be in school and require home instruction. There's also probably, there's some legal requirements related to voting preparation for our students. So we'll be updating our policy to reflect what the lawyers suggest. And then also as you got in your backup, it looks like tuition paying non-resident policy is something that you will be discussing in future meetings as well. Have I missed anything? Great.
Yeah. What?
Bravo, that was brief. Thank you.
Just the perfect speed. Anything? I think we're good, right? We got all of them. All right. Unfinished business.
One quick question. It was a great presentation tonight on the state of the buildings and grounds. Is there a way to give a Cashman-esque brief summary on just kind of what we've done so far on the transitions project for much later in the year? Have we started that?
Yes, Mr. Doherty, Dr. Smythe, and I have met a few times, and we're creating a working document for the presentation, kind of like a joint outline. He has started working on it, even with our alumni roundtable from a few weeks ago. He captured some of their feedback on video. So we're kind of designing the structure of it, and we're excited. We're excited to proceed. We're talking about maybe having admissions counselors actually come to that meeting here to talk to you, to be on hand. So we're trying to make it a little more dynamic than just stuck with me. So but I think we're planning some good things there.
It's really at the end. It's post budget. It's really but now that we've gotten through state of buildings and grounds, I want someone to look forward to. Thank you.
It'll be a good one.
Thank you. Any other?
Related tangentially to what Dave said, something that I'm going through in our house, it's top of mind because both my kids are transitioning to different buildings right now. And something that was brought to my attention by my older child, and I think I bring it up, my personal situation, because I do think there's kind of a macro question here, is there a way to, given the change in how competitive college entry has become, is there a way to look at some different, obviously all identifying information excluded, but a way to look at some of the kids who've been successful in different realms in their application process to understand what their transcripts look like and some of the peaks and valleys that maybe they've experienced grade-wise as a template for kids to understand like the different successful like right now going into high school, it looks like if you're not gunning it for all honors, then you can forget about getting into a competitive college, and that can't be true.
But that wasn't the message last night. It wasn't.
Message, but for those people who get letters home that recommend all honors, it is very hard to make an educated choice. And the kids for whom, and obviously these are high class problems, but the kids for whom they want to make choices, there is not contextualized information available. So I think there are stories in that we've been so successful in kids getting into great colleges and also colleges that are appropriate for all levels, right? And whatever your path of study that's right for you is. I think that it would be useful if there were a tool in the toolbox that created a narrative separate from that is available, you know what I mean? That could potentially be available. And it was asked for, and it seems hard to grasp. So,
I mean,
Sure.
really, you have so many kids who get in because not so much what the curriculum they take, but what they do outside the school.
I think that that's also an interesting story, right? Like, I don't know, no kid is the same, but I think seeing things that were successful for different people and getting some aggregate stories from different pockets and seeing like 1C doesn't kill your chance of getting into a good school, or understanding like the totality of what went on could be interesting.
I just think there are so many factors.
Of course.
Dr. Z wants to speak.
I do think the Naviance system offers some of this information. I just want to check with Mr. Doherty what like can be shared and what's more confidential. I do think it's a shifting goalpost though, and that's what's tough. But certainly I think some general profiles. I think it's going to look different, in 3 years from now. That's what's so hard versus a lot of stagnancy for 25 years before. So that I think, the annual updating of this too is important. But I think I'm going to ask that Naviance question too.
Maybe it's not about a particular student, but maybe spotting for trends. Do you know what I mean? Like I do feel like the landscape has shifted in terms of we used to not have to care so deeply walking into 9th grade, right? I think that, and we shouldn't care, and kids should follow the right path. That's not the suggestion, but for certain kids who really are thinking that far in advance, the tools are there more tools that we could provide based on aggregate data that we have? I guess that's the question. Sorry, Dave.
We're all getting older, younger, like the curriculum is. The 3rd grade lacrosse players at tournaments in Florida, they're thinking about college. They're thinking about their scholarships. So it's endemic to society, and we have to respond to it as a school system.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just following up on what Lisa's saying, and again, we'll talk about the details when we actually discuss this, but I think what you're looking for, what I'm looking for is not a crystal ball into the future, but I'm looking for a very thorough and savvy analysis of what's been happening, what's gone on over the past couple of years, so we can really understand. Again, the pandemic was threw everything up in the air. It was a snow globe. But we're coming through that, and to understand what's happened on those spray charts that we've seen is I think a key component.
This influences both at the undergraduate and graduate level, because you've had so many kids who have deferred, that have chosen to defer their learning or do an extra year someplace else rather than go straight in. So the data you're going to get from the past 3 years is not going to be reflective of what's going to happen when your 8th grader is applying to college. And, I think this is something you really work with your guidance counselor with in terms of course selection, because what you want is your kid to be successful and have sufficient time to do the extracurriculars, which may actually be more beneficial in choosing their path going forward than whether they take honors geometry or Regents geometry, right? I mean, and I don't think any data you're going to get from in a broad spectrum is going to answer that question for you.
I think it won't answer any question for anybody additionally, individually, I should say. But I'm looking for the savviness of understanding of what's gone on before us. Whether it's that it's extracurriculars, whether it's that you should be taking 4 sciences, whatever it is, I'd like to know as much as we can when the time comes.
And I agree. And I do want to double down some of the point that President McCarty said, which was sitting in that presentation last night. In no way, shape, or form was any message other than find the right path for you. Here are the differences. What's going to light you up? This is the individual. So I wouldn't want to mislead that was the takeaway. I 100% heard every educator in that room suggesting that every kid needs to make an informed choice about what their passion is and the path of study that they want to pursue. 100%. I'm here to support that effort for every kid. Dave articulated it better than I have.
I just, and that's what we're doing the presentation, right? That's what we're doing. But I would also add, right, that what's important is not just getting into the school, but are they staying in the school? Because lots of kids get in and then they don't end up graduating, right? And so whatever data they're collecting, hopefully it's also on what happens after acceptance. Retention.
great.
Yeah, and that is so important. You know, a little harder to capture, but we are looking at that. And also, you know, that message of claiming your education wherever you go, claiming your education, equipping our students to know, to be entrepreneurial about what they're doing, to look for those study abroad programs or whatever it is. I just want to say one quick thing that an alumnus said to me. I got to talk to her and her mom. She's at Harvard right now, and she said to everybody, don't fall into the trap of trying to be perfect at everything. I just thought it was so, because I was thinking, I'm like, I'm in that trap right now with my kids. And we're all in that. And like, you have to have, you know, A+ in every subject, do every extracurricular. I just thought there was real wisdom. And I want to tap into that with her more about finding your passion, specializing in that, and, you know, something to dig into.
I'm hoping that's something that we continue to emphasize as a district. It does distinguish us from the other places, which is one of the reasons why I love that this is called the transition to college and career, because every child has to find their own path. And that doesn't necessarily look, we know the numbers, the 90 whatever % that are looking at four-year colleges. That is what the majority of our students want. But helping those students find that path is what this is ultimately about, and being able to achieve it and be successful at it.
Thank you. Other unfinished business. New business. All right, very good. I will officially adjourn the meeting. And thank you, everyone. Everyone, they got here at 6:30 tonight. So.
Get a medal.
Yeah, not bad.